the regular meeting of the City Council for April 11th, 2006 to order. And I would like to have Councilmember Rosansky lead the Pledge of Allegiance. This second, we're going to have a roll call first.
The record will show that all members are present with the exception of Councilmember Ridgway, who's excused. And I know Councilmember Nichols is here.
And Councilmember Ridgway has been excused.
Yes.
Is there a closed session? There is no closed session report. The Pledge of Allegiance will be conducted by Councilmember Rosansky, and please remain standing for the invocation, which will be given by Councilmember Curry.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please join me in prayer. Our Father and God, we remember our troops overseas tonight. We ask you to comfort them, to protect them, to guide them. We remember our President. We ask, Lord, for wisdom, humility, and comfort on his part. We commend to you our Governor, our Congress, and our Legislature. We ask that they be guided through your wisdom in all the decisions which they must make. Lord, we ask for your wisdom as members of this council, that you would grant us in humility the wisdom and compassion to lead this city properly and righteously. We remember those in our community who are less fortunate, and we ask your blessings upon them, and we ask for generosity amongst our people to meet the needs of those among us less fortunate. Father, we thank you for our community. We thank you for all that you have blessed us with in Newport Beach that makes this a very special place of your earth to be. Give us wisdom, Father, as we act as stewards to protect it and secure it for future generations. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much.
Mr. Mayor, could I just dovetail on something right quick? I think the remarks, as far as the prayer was concerned, are very appropriate. We just found out over the weekend that the 1-1 Marine Division lost two men who were killed in firefights over the weekend. So those are the first casualties that the 1-1 has suffered, fatalities in two tours.
Thank you.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could add to that, the names of the Marines who were killed were Corporal Richard Walker and Lance Corporal Philip Martini. Corporal Walker was married with 3 children. Lance Corporal Martini was single. And, of course, we remember them in our prayers tonight as well.
Thank you very much. The first presentation that we have tonight is a presentation of a plaque to former council member and Mayor John Heffernan. John, could you come down, please? Bend over so we can put his brand on. This is a branding iron that's a family brand, and you can explain that to us when you get the chance to speak. John was on our city council for 5 years, and you have both a plaque recognizing that and your 5-year pin. Oh, good. No hat. No hat. I'm sorry, I didn't get to halfway. Here's the flag. And John, I really appreciated being able to work with you for most of that 5-year period.
Thanks.
Come on over. We're going to pose here. We appreciate you coming down.
Good. Thanks. Well, you know, you gave a politician a mic, so I have to say a few things. And I want to I think those comments were most appropriate. I think the prayer was very well done tonight, Mr. Curry. You're filling that seat a lot better than I ever did. And I think remembering those who have given their life, especially the 1-1 that we've adopted, is right on target. But I want to thank all of you. I mean, you're the people that on the council that are giving their time, and I thank you all for the service you give the city. And my time, I learned a lot, and I applaud you all for the time you give and the effort you give and all the material you take in for the benefit of the entire city. Thanks again.
Thank you very much, John, for coming down. Thank you for your 5 years of service. Oh, wait a second, John, you didn't tell us about the brand.
I don't know how this ever got in my office, but it did. This is a registered brand from my family, from Ventura. It goes back to the 1860s. It stands for Antone Borcher, the CAB, and they're an old ranch family, and that's still a registered brand. It's sort of an heirloom and of our family. And I don't know how it ended up in the mayor's office, but it did. But that's the story.
Thank you, John. Well, it's because I collect history and every now and then have centennial moments, and I guess that's part of our centennial moment tonight. But we'll get to that a little bit later. We have a presentation for Relay for Life. Can you come forward, please?
Mayor Webb, members of the City Council, my name is Annalise Subayasin. I'm here in my capacity as volunteer for the American Cancer Society Relay for Life of Newport Beach. I'm here with Andrea Waite from American Yacht Charters, and we are here to share the good news about the 5th Annual American Cancer Relay for Life of Newport Beach. As Councilmember Rosansky and City Manager Homer Bludout, a lot of people here know Relay for Life is an annual event that takes place in our city, and we have individuals consisting of 10 to 15 people from businesses, schools, families, friends, and others come together and go to a local spot where we walk and run for 24 hours, all to raise money for American Cancer Society's education, research, patient services, and advocacy programs. And so this year's relay will be held on Saturday and Sunday, May 20 to 21, from 10 a.m. to 10 a.m. It's a new schedule for us this year, and I'm inviting everyone here to participate as a team captain. You can also participate by joining a registered team. You may also become an event sponsor, or you can volunteer during relay weekend. And I'm going to give out an address, a website right now. It is www.acsevents.org/relay/CA/Newport Beach. And anybody who's interested can read about Relay for Life there. And finally, I would like to invite everybody here to our team fundraiser, Cruise for a Cure, on April 30 from 12 to 3 p.m. It will be aboard the Yacht Endeavor, which has been generously donated by American Yacht Charters. And for more information, you can also go to that website or call 949-887-1065. And I'd like to have Andrea say just a couple of words about their participation this year.
Well, this is our second annual Relay for Life Cruise for a Cure, and we're honored and privileged to help out, as we like to do, the community and the American Cancer Society. And we'd love to have you come. The harbor's beautiful. You probably don't get out as much as you should. Come see us and participate. It's a pretty small participation fee, actually, because, again, as she said, we donated the yacht. And we do that. We actually have an event also for the Leukemia Society, which is part of the cancer thing on a different date. So we would love to have you come. And, again, thank you so much for letting us be here tonight.
Thank you very much. And
Thank you.
we appreciate the efforts, and I'm sure that we'll have a large city turnout as far as the city employees and council members are concerned for the Relay for Life.
Thank you.
All right. City Clerk?
Notice to the public, the city provides a yellow sign-in card to assist in the preparation of the minutes. The completion of the card is not required in order to address the council. Speakers must limit comments to 5 minutes on agenda items. The council has the discretion to extend or shorten the time limit on agenda or non-agenda items. As a courtesy, please turn cell phones and pagers off or set them in the silent mode. This is the time for city council announcements or matters which council members would like placed on a future agenda for discussion, action, or report.
Councilmember Curry, do you have anything for us?
Just a couple of comments, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to again acknowledge former Mayor Heffernan. John, you left some big shoes up here to fill, and I have valued your advice and counsel as I have tried to fill those shoes, and I appreciate very much your wisdom and the council as I take this position, and I thank you for that, and I thank you for your service to the community and the reservoir of goodwill, frankly, that you've left with the people from your service here, and I commend you for it. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, later this evening, we will consider a measure to protect Newport Beach property owners against the abuse of eminent domain to take private property for private party benefit. In the course of researching this subject, I attended a public finance conference in San Francisco last week where this issue was discussed. Among the many proposals at the state level to address eminent domain is an initiative known as the Protect Our Homes Initiative, supported, among others, by Assemblywoman Mamie Walters, which, in addition to restrictions on eminent domain, also requires compensation for property owners who incur economic damages from a broad list of governmental regulatory actions. These actions can include city charter amendments, downzoning actions, ordinances, local laws, or other regulations. Property owners who are damaged under the state constitutional amendment are subject to being compensated. The Greenlight 2 initiative currently in circulation would impose a voter approval requirement on development proposals that meet certain thresholds, even though the use is authorized under the current zoning general plan. I have great concerns that should both measures qualify for the ballot and pass, the city would be subject to paying compensation to property owners whose development proposals are defeated. In fact, the combination of both initiatives could create a perverse, unintended consequence of having property owners rush to the ballot in hopes of being defeated so as to establish a claim for compensation. In fact, this would appear to be possible multiple times in each election cycle. The potential for fiscal impact to the city and its ability to provide services would be severe. The city attorney has been requested previously to prepare a fiscal impact report on this initiative, and I would request that she consider the impact of the Protect Our Homes initiative in conjunction with Greenlight 2 as part of this analysis, and that the issue of potential compensation liability for impermissible takings generally be included in this analysis. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Selich?
I have nothing, thank you.
Councilmember Rosansky?
Just like to quickly announce that the Newport Beach Film Festival will be kicking off on April 20th, running through April 30th. I encourage all of you to come out and attend. It's a great event. It'll be happening in multiple venues around town. It's just fun. Thank you.
Councilmember Nichols?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Daigle?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Webb. Great to see you, John, and I have many fond memories of your time on council, particularly when you served as our mayor. By happenstance, I have another aquatics issue. It's really in response to a request from the community. And as you know, over at Corona Del Mar High School, we have a Marion Bergerson Aquatics Facility. It's a joint powers agreement between the city of Newport Beach and the Newport Mesa School District. And when that came online, it was a cooperative effort to build this facility. At the time on our Newport Beach City Council, Gene Watt, Evelyn Hart, Clarence Turner, there's also Supervisor Tom Riley and Senator Bergeson. And many families were also part of this effort, Ralph Rodheims, the Fords, Janet and Waukee Ray. And so I was over at the pool last week and could just see the extraordinary community benefit. You know, one group leaves and another big group comes in. And so we see this benefit in families and young adults and children and seniors. Now, 15 or so years later, the pool is in need of refurbishment. And from the perspective of the city, it would make sense for us to protect our investment. And so what's happening in the community is there's a group of families and parents that have come together to raise funds for this refurbishment. And so what I would request is part of our budget cycle, and this would be for consideration of the entire City Council, is that the city have a challenge pledge of $290,000, and that would need to be matched by community contributions. And secondly, is in discussing with city staff that the city would also want to retain its current 29% usage level. So we'd want to be able to maintain also our use of the facility. And the $290,000 figure was arrived at. It's estimated to be $1 million project. So thank you.
Thank you. It's now time for your centennial moment. We now have 143 days until our 100th birthday on September 1st of 2006. And on April 11th, 1910, apparently the city council elections were held in April. And I guess that they didn't have a county recorder because It says the general municipal election was held April 11th, 1910, and this is a meeting that's being held on April 11th. So the city council got together and counted the votes. And the total votes cast were 121. So they didn't have too many votes to cast, but they were electing 3 council members, and the council members got the elected people got 58 votes, 56 votes, and 58 votes. So that J.M. McMillan and Stanford Lee Collins and Rudolph Strauss were elected in 1910. Moving on to 1949, the chief of police, on the application of Darwin Williams, was actually recommending against the permit to operate a Skillo quiz game from the standpoint that it would create a nuisance down in the fun zone area. Also in that same meeting, they annexed the Ensign School site, and there was also a license request. Now, this is something I'm sure that the Harbor Commission hasn't quite considered, but I hope that they do. They wanted to, this guy was granted an application and approved a license to operate an ice cream vending boat in the bay. And so I hope that we'll consider something like that. Maybe we can install something like that on the ferry. Mayor Stoddard in 1960 indicated or proclaimed that April 9th to 16th would be the Barbershop Harmony Week. In other words, they had a barbershop quartet, and that was composed of Charlie Brown, Larry Walker, Bill Bowe, Bob Pettit, and director Ernie Brackett. So that's our centennial moment for this year, or for this week. Consent calendar, City Clerk?
All matters listed under consent calendar, items 1 through 11, are considered by the council to be routine and will all be enacted by one motion in the form listed below. The city council members have received detailed staff reports on each of the items recommending an action. There will be no separate discussion of these items prior to the time the council votes on the motion, unless members of the council, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and or removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Members of the public who wish to discuss a consent calendar item should come forward to the lectern upon invitation by the mayor, state their name and item number. If the optional sign-in card has been completed, it should be placed in the box provided at the podium.
Thank you. Councilmember Curry, did you have anything that you'd like to remove, or I think you had a minor correction?
I just have a minor correction to the minutes on page 594, item H. The recommendation on eminent domain was to prohibit eminent domain for private purposes, not public purposes.
Okay, thank you. So that we won't pull that item, but the minutes will stand corrected in that way. Councilmember Salich?
I have nothing.
Mayor Pro Tem Rosansky?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Daigle?
None, thank you.
Councilmember Nichols?
You have one, and I think it can be done without pulling it. Asking the question, on this is the money for an EIR.
Which item number, Councilman Nichols?
Number 8. An expansion of Hyatt Regency, which is the old Newport hotel. And I wondered if we could just get an idea of what that entails.
City Manager Wood?
I think we can do that, and we can do it very quickly. Basically, the staff report information. I think Councilman Nichols just wants to make sure that it is done publicly. But the project that the EIR would be done on proposes to expand by adding 88 new timeshare units, a new 24,387 square foot ballroom, 10,072 square foot spa, and 2-level parking garage. The implementation of the project would require the demolition of 12 villas and the existing 3,190 square foot ballroom and the elimination of the executive golf course.
Does
So
that
this is
answer
just
your
beginning
questions?
the process.
It's a pretty big project, is all I'm saying. And I'm happy with that.
Okay, so council has no items to pull off the agenda. Does the staff have any items?
None.
Does anybody in the public wish to discuss items 1 through 11? Seeing none,
Mr. Mayor, I move the adoption of the consent calendar items 1 through 11.
thank you very much. Second? Okay, please vote.
Motion carries.
That brings us to item 12, which is an item that the staff has recommended to be continued. This is the Sober Living by the Sea. We would continue it to May 23rd, 2006.
Motion to continue the item.
No.
Is there a second?
Second.
Hold on for just 1 minute. We're having a legal discussion.
I don't think so. I don't think you have to re-advertise it. They're continuing the public hearing.
Okay, there's a discussion of whether or not we need to open the public hearing. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think.
Councilmember Nichols, this is on a motion to continue this item.
It's regarding this whole motion, and that is there some legal reason why this was brought forth today? Is what I'm questioning.
The item was on the agenda as a result of a appeal from a planning commission decision by the applicant. In discussing with the applicant, they've agreed to give the city additional time to look at the issues before we bring it back to the council for a final determination.
So it was for us to have it continued, so it's sort of we're having it.
There have been legal issues that have been raised with regard to this application, and in consultation with the applicant, they agreed with our request to continue this, and we're asking the council to authorize that continuance for 30 days.
Okay, thank you. Please vote.
Motion carries.
Item 13 is the Justice Assistance Grant. Staff want to give a report on that?
Mr. Mayor, this item is a public hearing because public input needs to be made available, and I don't know if Lieutenant Tom Gazy, I know he's in the audience, if he cares to say anything about this grant application. It is a minor grant of $7,422.03.
Those are pretty precise amounts.
Tom Gazy from the Police Department. As you know, the funds for our crime prevention program were previously funded partially through a block law enforcement grant, which ended in 2005. And since that time, the Federal Department of Justice has granted some limited funds through the JAG, or Justice Assistance Program. It totals about $7,400 and offsets our costs relative to our crime prevention program that's filled by one full-time position and one part-time position.
Does the council have any questions of Lieutenant Gazy? Councilmember Nichols.
Basically, the costs of the two people that are involved are still on our payroll, and we're paying that, though, right? The $7,000 sort of covers some of the paperwork costs, I guess.
It covers some of the program costs and therefore offsets some of the costs relative to the program. Yes, sir.
But basically, we picked up the program costs on that.
Yes, sir.
That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody from the public wish to comment on this item? Seeing none, I close the public hearing. Is there a motion?
Move the motion.
Second.
Please vote.
Motion carries.
All right. Next item is the discussion of the general plan update. Who is going to give the staff report on that, City Manager?
Actually, Mr. Mayor, we really don't have much in the way of a staff report. We we have given you some rather lengthy handouts which show on the left-hand side the policies as they have been recommended by the General Plan Advisory Committee, and with strikeout and underline from any changes that had been requested by the Planning Commission or City Council. And then on the right side, we're showing you the revised version of the policy if it did have a revision. I'd also like to point out for the council as well as for members of the public that the public review draft of the general plan is out. It is available in the planning department and in the public libraries. It's on our website, www.nbvision2025.com, and the public can purchase it from the planning department either in hard copy, which the mayor was just holding up, or in the much more compact CD form, which is also less expensive. The way the Planning Commission handled this public hearing last Thursday was to go through the handout with the sheets showing the changes, element by element. We've also distributed to you this evening a list of changes that the Planning Commission recommended at their meeting last Thursday. And what I will try to do for the council as you're going through the larger sheets is to point out when you reach a section where there's a Planning Commission recommendation for you to consider. Assisting me this evening will be from EIP Associates. Our prime consultant, Mr. Tesher, is not available this evening, but Jesse Barkley is here from that firm, and of course our planning director, Patricia Temple, and the senior planner on the project, Greg Ramirez. And Nancy Gardner, the chairperson of GPAC, is also here.
Well, thank you all for being here. What we will do then is go through I think I'll follow the same procedure as the Planning Commission. We'll go through it element by element. If a council member has something that they wish to discuss related to the body of the element before we get started with the various different goals, then they should mention that up front. Otherwise, I'll ask that you make comments related to each one of the goals. And the first one will be harbor and bay element. Second will be historical resources. Third is recreation. Fourth is arts and cultural element. Fifth is the natural resources element. And sixth will be the safety element. Seventh will be the noise element. So that gives you the order of business. So we'll start off with the harbor and bay element. And it looks like that the Planning Commission got all the way down to one before they made a change.
Actually, the first change from the Planning Commission, and this was at the recommendation of the Harbor Commission, and there is attached to your staff report some communication from the Harbor Commission with these changes. The first was in the introduction section before we even get to policies, and there is a list of bullet points describing issues in the harbor and bay. And the original draft had read improper mooring transfers leading to lack of public access to available moorings, and the Planning Commission recommended changing that to need to improve administration of harbor resources. Resources in this case in lowercase. We aren't referring to the division, but to the resources in nature.
Does council have any comments further to that? Does that seem acceptable?
Just if I can, Sharon, have the Harbor Commission's comments been incorporated now by the Planning Commission? Have they sort of reached a consensus, or are there still outstanding issues between the Commission and the Planning Commission?
I believe the Planning Commission agreed with all of the changes recommended by the Harbor Commission. In a couple of cases, they may have chosen a slightly different word. But,
okay. So the document that we have here represents the consensus outcome on this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
I'd have the same question about GPAC. Are they on board with these changes?
We have not had an opportunity to return to, well, I'm sorry. When the Harbor Commission first considered the harbor and bay element, they made some recommendations, especially with regard to mooring, that the GPAC did not accept, nor did the Planning Commission and the City Council. The Harbor Commission then scheduled another review of the element and recommended some additional changes, in some cases some different language to take them in the same direction they had originally wanted. We did not have an opportunity to take that back to GPAC, and that is what the Planning Commission reviewed just last Thursday.
Mayor Webb?
Yes, Councilman Daigle?
Yes, we have an in-house expert, Dave Kiff, on all these back bay changes, harbor changes. I wanted to get his thoughts if he sees any difficulties with these proposed changes.
I think there is one he wants to talk about.
Wonderful.
But we'll wait until we get to that one, right? Okay.
It's probably this one right here. Is it not?
Talk about paddling,
Policy
paddle
later.
boarding? Okay, the Planning Commission had recommended one change in policy 1.1, which changed paddling to paddle boarding. Anybody have any problems with that one? Okay. Then we'll go forward to,
I do have one question, and that is, we're talking about a pleasure boating harbor, and I'm concerned that the closer we make this to a working harbor of some sort, the more chance we're going to have for getting dredging done, and the more chance we're going to have to get eelgrass mitigation. And right now, that's very big in causing problems for any kind of dredging in the harbor.
I think when we get further along, you'll see that there are some policies that speak to balancing among those things, so perhaps we can discuss that.
But I'm saying that big old title here, Harbor and Bay Element, a hospitable, navigable, pleasure boating harbor. In other words, we're ignoring any commercial or any other type of use except the pleasure boating. And that may be to our disadvantage when we come back to argue later on that we should have funds from the Army Corps of Engineers on dredging, and we should have funds for other things, navigation and so forth. If this is a pleasure boating harbor, then you know, that's sort of a side.
Councilman, on HB 1-1, the second item there talks about water-dependent and water-related commercial activities. Do you think that helps to address your concerns at all?
In the HB 1.
that's in this, Dick?
Yeah.
This is the handout.
It's the new one.
The new handout,
Okay. I'm
front
sorry.
page?
Yeah, I got it. In the 1.1, Homer? Or?
Yeah, the second bullet down.
The water-dependent and water-related commercial activities.
I think that the element, as I read it, has a pretty balanced description related to the actual uses that are currently within the harbor and the bay, and I don't envision over time there being a significant change in the mix that's out there today. And so that I believe that, in my opinion on the element, is that we need to pretty much rely on the wording that has been proposed by our Harbor Commission.
Mr. Mayor, I finally found where Councilmember Nichols is reading from, and it is in the bound draft plan on pages 4-2 and 4-3, and it's the title and sort of subtitle, if you will, of the element. It says Harbor and Bay Element, a hospitable, navigable pleasure boating harbor. That phrase comes from the vision statement that was developed by the GPAC and later approved by the Planning Commission and the City Council, and that language is also found on page 2-5 of the draft general plan, which is where the vision statement is set forth.
Thank you. Okay, shall we move on to the item H 3.2, which is reuse? Well,
This was not a recommendation from the Harbor Commission, but originated at the Planning Commission. They were uncomfortable with the term redevelopment, as it may imply a redevelopment agency, which it was not anyone's thought for the harbor and bay area, and so the word was changed to reuse.
Okay, so instead of having redevelopment activities, it's reuse of properties.
Yes.
Anybody question that? Good, let's move forward then. It looks like the liveaboard vessels.
That was relocated to 5.7.
Okay, so we'll get that a little bit later then.
Yes. 5.6 on the second page of tonight's handout is the mooring transfers, and
Right before that, you have 5.5 that says temporary
I'm
rental of
sorry.
moorings.
Missed that.
And we're taking out temporary in the main line, but shouldn't you have the title
Yes.
removed also? So 5.5 would read, rental of moorings, facilitate access to vacant moorings for rental use.
If the council agrees with that change.
What was the reason for that? I mean, isn't that
I-
kind of redundant? I
this-
mean, don't we rent moorings for rental use?
This is tied in with the following policy, 5.6, because this was a change that was made by the Harbor Commission at the same time as they changed the language in 5.6, where the staff was proposing that we tighten up, formalize the way that we handle mooring transfers. And I
Well,
think
to me,
that
it seems like 5.5 deals with, you got a vacant mooring and maybe some visitor comes in, am I reading it wrong, and they want to rent the mooring temporarily while they're in the harbor, or is that not
Yes,
accurate?
and that was what the staff and GPAC intended to facilitate, was the temporary rental, but for the actual mooring transfer, the long-term transfer, we were proposing a more regulated process, and that is the one that I believe Mr. Kiff wants to speak to.
Okay, but now, I don't quite understand the removal of the temporary.
Yeah, why did we remove temporary then? It changes the whole
That was the
intent of the policy.
recommendation of the
Well,
Harbor
then
Commission.
I recommend
and
we
the
turn
Planning
it back
Commission.
unless you can give me a
Yeah,
better reason.
Is this the Harbor Commission, or
And the
is
planning,
this
this originated with the Harbor Commission, and the Planning Commission agreed.
does the council like to get somebody from the Harbor Commission to explain why that,
Yeah, let's do that.
who's going to represent the Harbor Commission on that item? Mr. Crow? Briefly.
I believe that was in order to, it was known that we, under the title, if we retain the title as temporary rental of moorings, it was simply to simplify the statement and say, under temporary rental of moorings, we wanted to facilitate access to vacant moorings for that rental use. It was just eliminating a redundancy, not changing the character of it.
I don't see where it really was that redundant, and
Yeah.
besides, Councilman...
It's not a,
Big deal.
it's not an epic.
Thank you, John.
issue.
I recommend that we just put it back in and leave the title as temporary rental of moorings.
Council concur? Don't see anybody objecting?
I object.
You object? Yes. We got really 5-1, I believe. Okay. Let's put temporary back. Mooring transfers, is this something that, Dave, did you want to comment on that?
Mr. Mayor, this has been a back-and-forth issue for your council, it's for the Planning Commission, for Harbor Commission, and indeed, it's why a number of folks from the Newport Mooring Association are here in the audience. Staff has been quite consistent in making a recommendation to you that the current practice of making a private profit off the transfer of moorings from one individual to another is not an appropriate activity to occur on public tidelands. We've been very strong as a staff about that. You have backed that up in the old language, the 5.6 language, previous to when the Harbor Commission and/or the Planning Commission proposed an amendment to it. I wanted to share with you an example of that industry. This is from the log newspaper just from today. I just went out and got it. You can see there's 8 of these on there, that some of them are going off the top of the screen, where folks are selling moorings for, that one's $38,900. There's one for $73,000. There's one for $95,000. There's one for $58,000. That's a lot of money that's passing from private property owner to private property owner for things that they don't actually have a right to own. This is the public's property. The mooring spaces are public mooring spaces. And as such, these transfers occur, and our waiting list, our mooring waiting list, never moves. So we had requested in the general plan that there be a strong policy, a strong statement on council's part that kind of activity should be removed if possible. So I'm here today to ask you to retain the language that you had approved previously in 5.6.
Yeah, I support Dave in that. I think that there is a significant profit being made on the tidelands here. As you can see, I don't even know if this already violates our ordinances, but if it does, I would recommend we follow up on these. But even if it doesn't, I think we've commissioned a study now to investigate, what the value of all these harbor uses are. I think we're in the future going to be taking a much tougher stance on these transfers, and I would recommend that we support that with our general plan.
Mayor Webb, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Rosansky. I appreciate the consistency of staff on this issue. I will continue to back it up and would also support that we retain the original language.
Mr. Mayor, can I just ask, is there anyone representing this point of view that would like to comment on this before we move through here?
That was the next item I was going to do, but
okay.
Yes, you can ask too.
Mr. Mayor, I've got a question for
Mr.
staff
Sellers.
first. What's the practice in other harbors on mooring transfers?
Well, it's going to vary. Some harbors are able to control the activity better than others. This harbor has a tradition dating back a long time, long before ours, to kind of take that hands-off approach and allow transfers to occur without the mooring itself coming to the city first. But I'd have to research that further.
Yeah, because I know over in Avalon, the moorings transfer. There is no waiting list, and they transfer. And
just to be clear, our current code actually doesn't authorize the transfer of moorings that goes on. But over time, the practice has evolved in a way where the process has changed, and it's a very convoluted process that came to our attention on how they actually do this. And I won't go into it now, but our code is pretty clear now that it's not allowed. But through a loophole in the processing system, these type of transfers have been occurring, and they've never been enforced.
well, I understand that. I'm just trying to get an understanding of how other harbors that have moorings, how they handle mooring transfers, to whether we're doing it correctly or incorrectly or whatever.
We had conversed with the State Lands Commission on this about 6 months ago, and they sent us some examples of ordinances that we should attempt to copy to try and avoid this practice.
Like what jurisdictions were they from?
I believe one was an Avalon ordinance. Whether it was actually adopted or not, I don't know. I thought the other one was from Ventura.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, the policy, as I see it, doesn't eliminate or the recommended change in wording, which says foster public access to moorings by enforcing and refining the derelict boat ordinance and regulating transfers by permit holders. So that doesn't prohibit what you're trying to do. It just doesn't as specifically stated.
Correct.
Well, yeah, and I think that regulating transfers is a very weak alternative to eliminating private profits.
Okay, I think that this is an item that might have a little bit of controversy within the boating community, so are there representatives from either the Harbor Commission or the Mooring Association that would like to speak on this?
John Coro, Chairman of the Harbor Commission, 1004 South Bayfront, Newport Beach. As Mr. Kiff has related, this has gone back and forth many, many times and has gotten to the point where whether it's a weak alternative or not, the language that is there now is firmly believed by all the members of the Harbor Commission to be adequate to accomplish the ends that are desired by the city, but the change of language really was trying to remove a sort of an edge to the prior language And we saw our role as being a fair broker of ideas and wordsmithing, not of selling the farm in that situation. So the resulting language here is language that is supported by the Harbor Commission, and at the same time also supported, as we believe, meaning what you are concerned with at this time. We are more than fully aware of the studies that are underway, and we look forward to the results of those studies, and we believe those will give us all some new guidance on how to deal in precision with this issue. The other jurisdictions you're looking for regulation of moorings, Port of San Diego, the Santa Catalina Island Company, which handles all of the coves outside of Avalon on the island, and Monterey, and two in far northern California that probably aren't applicable because most of the moorings are occupied by commercial vessels.
John, how many of the harbor commissioners own moorings, do you know?
Good Lord.
Or actually, they don't own them. How many of them lease them from the city?
I think one, possibly two.
Okay.
To be honest with you, I don't really know.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else from the Mooring Association that would like to comment on this one way or the other? Mr. Ford.
Good evening, Mayor Webb and Councilman and Council Lady. I'm Carter Ford, reside in Lido Isle. Moved to this community some 40 years ago out of a love for the harbor and have remained here since. I've been very involved over a period of time, but especially in the last year, with a collaborative effort of a joint staff and citizen effort related to harbor issues. And I emphasize the word joint. It is a collaborative effort. It's ongoing. All these things that are quite complex and all interrelate will come back to you in due course over the next many months as these groups under the Harbor Commission working with your Harbor Resources Department come to fruition. Related to that, before I forget to mention it, in many meetings with Harbor Resources staff, as they have come to and this is a new staff, as you know, in the last 2+ years ago, as they have become aware of the workings of the harbor as it relates to moorings. They have, I'm referring to Tom Ross Miller and to Chris Miller, they have specifically shared with us in meetings that the wait list, which they are aware, there's nothing in the code that provides for it that we know of, and it simply is not a functional way of reassigning moorings and hasn't been for possibly 40 years. So we looked at this, and as we look at the language that was placed before you some time ago, it refers to eliminating private profits, it refers to taking the permit back to a wait list. And I would encourage you, and I hope you've done this, if you were to look toward the back of your package, there's a letter from the chairman of the Harbor Commission, Carreau, and it has several pages of discussion related to the appropriate manner of what this group, and we support them totally, felt was suitable language for a general plan related to this topic. What I'm trying to get at is that the language that came to originally dictates a couple of solutions, and it also has some words in it that really we don't believe you can define and should even want to try. By that, private profits. How do you define that as it relates to this? We all acknowledge, first of all, these are mooring permits. Let's be clear, we don't see them as private property. They are a permit issued by the city. There are, if we look locally, regionally, nationally, thousands of types of permits that governmental bodies issue, and those permits become a part of the process when the permit holder moves onward to some other situation. We could all think of many different examples. So if you go back over 40 years, and there's people in the audience that have that history, the administrators back in those days found that it was necessary for the good workings of the harbor to allow mooring permits to transfer with the transfer of boats. And that's how, as I comprehended, that began. And I would gently say that while one could think of it as a convoluted process, the facts are on the city web and on the Orange County Sheriff's Harbor Patrol web are very specific instructions that say instructions for mooring permit transfer. And people follow that and have done so carefully now for decades. So nobody disagrees that we shouldn't look at this. What serves this harbor well in dealing with these types of public assets? The real question becomes, how do you address this in a general plan document? And from the core of my personal being, I take umbrage at the language as proposed because it defines solutions that are potentially not what your own staff will find that they will be recommending to you later, and it forces inappropriately a direction. So I would strongly ask that in light of all the documentation you've received, and it's quite extensive, and in light of the comment that, yes, ultimately, at the end of the day, you will have the opportunity to review this, and the language that the Harbor Commission and the Planning Commission have proposed to you, and they both weighed in on this, that you would support that language, recognizing that we all agree this is a topic for study, but that anything you do with it has an impact on other things. And there's a treatise that some of you might have seen that talks about transferability of moorings. And just to give you maybe a few examples there, if you have a wait list that you force things to, first of all, there's a tendency, logically, for people not to turn in the mooring permit. Am I out of time?
Your time is up.
All right. Well, then I thank you for reminding me of that. I will leave the microphone. Thank you very much.
I'd like to ask you a question.
Yes, sir.
I understand that you're engaged in the business of brokering moorings?
No, I would not say that's a correct statement. I've never brokered a mooring.
Are you in the boat brokerage business?
No, I'm not in the boat brokerage business. And I'm glad you asked this, by the way. The realities are some years ago, the city staff came to me and said there's a boat and mooring that we're on our way to revoking the permit and confiscating the boat, and we think you could help us and help them. We don't want the boat. We don't want the mooring. We think they need some help. And so I put together a team of people, and we helped the owner of that boat. And out of that, I became aware and learned over the years many different things. And I think, by the way, let's be real. There's some people on staff that have seen that I have transferred my share of moorings over the last few years, and I acknowledge that. And maybe
how many in the last 5 years, let's say?
It's
ballpark.
In the teens.
So more than 10, less than 20
That's
in the last
correct,
5 years?
In the last 5 years, I would say that's
that
correct.
You've personally transferred?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank
and
you.
To put context on that, there's over 1,000 moorings, and I'm a little guy in the harbor. There are businesses that have half a dozen mooring permits to run their business. There are others.
Did you use those permits to run your business?
No.
Okay.
No. I became involved, and I don't think this should be candidly the issue, but what I learned is that there are people who have a boat that doesn't quite make it as a derelict, and so the city really isn't in a position to make it go away. The people aren't in a position to make it go away, and people found me or I found them and said, hey, I don't know what to do here, but I'd like the permit to go to somebody else, but I need some facilitation. So you could call me, in that sense, a person who has facilitated those things.
So you're a facilitator, not a broker.
Well, I believe brokering has a technical term, and I've never done that. So
thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to discuss this item at this time?
I hope so.
Well, hold on for just 1 second. If you want to discuss it, come on forward.
There's different kinds of moorings, big ones, small.
My name is Xavier Peniche Fuentes, and I would just like to say on this agenda issue that there should be a law in the city of Newport Beach, obviously, that in the mooring spaces, that if the boat does not get used a certain time a month, it should be disposed properly, so that will impulse, I believe, the boat owners to have their boats on the water more time, and that will make the city more beautiful.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Good evening, Mayor and ladies and gentlemen of the council. My name is Bill Moses. I have mooring F9 here in Newport, and it's been my privilege to work with the Harbor Resources Department, Harbor Commissioners, Planning Commissioners, Dave at times, going back many years on the original mooring subcommittee, which I'm sure he remembers. We spent countless hours in a room attached to this building discussing all of these items. And I am here tonight to lend my voice of support to the efforts of that body of various groups I've mentioned that have been worked very cooperatively in a collaborative effort, as Carter eloquently stated, to try to improve the situation of the moorings here in Newport. And I might add, I couldn't possibly do as good a job here at the mic as Carter has, but I do know the history for the last several years. And it's interesting to me that Dave tonight has this information, because just a year ago, I did kind of the same research as this Mooring Master Plan Subcommittee started out in their original quest to recruit the services of an expensive consultant to come up with all these proposed solutions to the position of the moorings, administration, and a huge bag of goodies that were going to be addressed. In my research, which was personal contact via the telephone to Port San Luis, Pillar Point, Avalon, Harbor Master, various other harbors up and down the coast, I found that almost all of them have abandoned a wait list, and moorings sell regularly for less than here in Newport. I think lately it's taken a tremendous spike for purposes of demand, obviously, and supply. What we are proposing is that this language that Carter and others here find inappropriate in this type of document to be replaced by what has been brought forward by the Planning Commission after a lot of wordsmithing by, people that you and your predecessors have appointed to the Harbor Commission, to the Planning Commission, and have hired in the Harbor Resources Department. You should give credence to what they have to say. Dave has his own opinion. I respect that. We'll work together in the future, no matter what comes out of this meeting. But the notion that this has been done improperly, as this young lady has alleged here, I find questionable. Apparently, she's suggesting that the city has condoned an improper transfer over 40 years. I don't see how that's happened when it follows the letter of the law, as Carter has pointed out. I also would like to state that it's probably a good thing Carter has helped with those derelict boats, or else they might still be out there on those moorings. I don't think anybody wants to see derelict boats on the moorings. I certainly don't want to have a neighbor that has a derelict boat. So if a return to a wait list is insisted upon by the city, I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens, but I think it's inviting more problems of this nature. But I'd be very interested to see what the state sent to Dave. I'm sure you'll be sharing that with our group in the near future. Okay, because we have also talked to the state title ends, and not one of them that we could identify had any issue with the way things were being handled here in Newport, despite what this woman said tonight. City attorney said tonight. Excuse me, I don't know your capacity here. So anyhow, to conclude my statements, I just think that it would be appropriate and appreciated by many who you need to work with, Planning Commission, Harbor Commissioners, to give some due consideration and credence to what they've brought before you, and it has not been taken lightly by anyone. So that concludes my statements, unless you have any questions for me.
Do you have any questions? Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank
Moses.
you.
Okay, I think then, well, all right, one more. I hope we don't have this much testimony on every item.
All right, I'll be brief.
Mr. Beek.
Seymour Beek. I live on the South Bay front of Balboa Island. It was mentioned that this has been a back-and-forth issue about mooring transfers and how moorings are handled and so on. In my lifetime here, it hasn't been much of a back-and-forth issue. As someone mentioned, for decades, it's been done pretty much the same way. It only became a back-and-forth issue when the GPAC committee started rewriting the words that were already in the harbor element of the general plan. And the harbor and bay element of the general plan is basically the wording that the Harbor Commission still wants to see and that the Planning Commission approved. There is this notion flying around that somehow or other there are big profits to be made trading in moorings. Well, if anybody's going to try to get rich doing that, I would suggest they get a day job, because I don't think that there are big profits to be had there. And if we wanted to eliminate that possibility, there are other ways around it. We could limit the number of transfers each individual could make, the number of transfers that each individual mooring could make in a specific period of time. So there'd be other ways to regulate that if we wanted to. The system we now have works. It's not perfect, but it does work, and it's been working for a long time. People buy the boat that's on a mooring, and they get the mooring permit when they transfer the mooring permit when they buy the boat. So it's the sale of a boat on a mooring. And I don't know how a wait list is going to be a good solution anyway, because the wait list, number one, you're going to have huge staff time to administer the wait list. There's still going to be ways to effectively transfer a boat on a mooring, like selling an interest in it, selling a 99% interest in it, and keeping 1% and keeping the mooring permit. So there are going to be ways devious people can make profits no matter what you do. And I think we've got a system that works now, and I think we ought to keep it. I can only imagine it getting worse by trying to go to a waiting list system. I hope that, there's one other issue that came up. What do we do in other harbors? I think that there are other harbors that work exactly the way we do, and the State Lands Commission isn't all over them on the subject. And I hope someone on the mooring committee here knows more about that than I do. I think somebody had some specific information on other harbors, like Santa Barbara, Monterey, et cetera. I believe those are two that do it the same way we've been doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Beek. Okay.
Hi, my name is Mark Sykes, businessman here in Newport Harbor. I do some of the dredging for you. I wanted to address a couple of issues. One,
Okay,
that's
the issue that we're talking about is mooring transfers.
You betcha.
Okay.
All right. That's obscene, in my opinion, and I also think it's ludicrous. I happen to know some transfers that have taken place in the last couple of years, and they're nowhere near that. They're in the teens and 20s. So these are people that are fishing. In the past history, we used to have a harbor resources staff and also a harbor master that would go after these people that were advertising the moorings. We've had a lack of continuity when the last harbor resources staff resigned, and also the new harbor masters. We've had 3 or 4 of them in the last few years. I think a lot of people have sort of lost track of what their duties are, but I know Harry Gage used to stay on top of this very heavily, and he did not approve of brokering moorings. To another issue, one of the advantages, and I think I gave this in a list to Ed Selich, was I run a business here in the harbor, and about 6 years ago, I bought a mooring from the city. They auctioned it. I bought it. My plan was to put a piece of equipment on it that would serve the harbor, specifically a landing craft that could deliver a tractor to the beach to do beach restoration. Okay, that seems to me like a fairly reasonable use and example of transferability. What happened was the city lost their dredging permit. I almost went out of business because I was down for a year, and I had to sell the mooring to keep myself afloat and get my money back out of it. To me, that was another legitimate use of the transferability. So I'd like to give you those ideas before you just slam the door or put Dave's opinion in stone in your general plan. I'd like you to consider those things. Thank you.
Thank you. How many more do we want to that want to talk about this?
Lots. Glenn Twitchell, mooring K10. I'd like to talk about the law of unintended consequences. A lot of the derelict boats that were out there in the harbor was because the city code that required that a boat had to stay on the mooring. If there was a boat gone for 90 days, the city could take it. So everybody started leaving placeholder boats out there. Now that people are selling those boats for more than the boat is worth and transferring the mooring, a lot of those derelict boats are out of the harbor. Sorry, I'm very nervous. Frequently, I've heard a lot of stories about people who have been on the waiting list for 25, 35 years. I think they're just using that as a bragging stone to talk about. Anybody who's seriously into boating is not going to wait 25 years to find a place to keep their boat. There's a confusion here between public access and free. These people aren't waiting for a mooring to put their boat on. They're waiting for something free. People who invest in their place, like the people who invest on their homes around here, they take care of it. But someone who's going to get it for free, are they going to take care of it as much as someone else? There's been people who have gotten that list. They finally came up on that list, and they got their mooring, and they turned around and flipped it a couple weeks later. So this waiting list is not this holy grail to hold on to. There is a system in place. It's not perfect. All the people who care about this harbor are working at it, trying to change it, trying to make it work better. But just because someone's opinion is, and this, another thing about these ads here, these have been up there for months. Those people are nuts, thinking that they're going to get that much money for it. I've called a couple of them. One of them even advertises that you may be able to stretch that mooring. I've called them and said, that's false advertising. There's a lock on stretching moorings in this harbor. So we can't use these people as an example, and we can't use the fact that there is some money going around. Sorry, still nervous. Anyway, I think you should listen to the guys who've been working at this for years and stick with the language that they recommended. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like to speak, please move to the forward so that we can save a little bit of time walking back and forth.
Monica Twitchell. I live aboard at Kilo 10. I'm on a mooring. And I'd like to restate what's been said this evening in terms of the ludicrousness of these advertisements. They have, in fact, been posted for months and months, and there has to be something to be said about the fact that they're fishing. It's insane. It's completely ridiculous. And a vast majority of the people out there who have moorings and occasionally have a need to transfer, I mean, most people buy a mooring, keep that mooring. They might transfer when they buy a bigger boat and need a bigger mooring. All right? That all serves a purpose. A vast majority of your people are going to be in that game because it's not a game. It's something you do. We bought our mooring because we intended to put our boat on it and live on it. That's precisely what we do. We did not buy it with any intention of making any kind of a profit. All right? And a vast majority of the people out there are going to be in exactly the same boat, if you will, pardon the pun. All right? That is the reality of it. And I think that, as has been stated this evening, it should be taken. The Planning Commission and the Harbor Commission have worked very hard in conjunction with Harbor Resources to develop this language, and it does facilitate proper transferability and accessibility to the public. Even these ads, the statement is that it's limited access to the public. Those ads are published in a paper that is accessible to any member of the public. Therefore, it's not limited access. The craziness of what's asking is what's limiting, but that's why they're still advertised. In terms of some of the transfers and the protocol behind making transfers in some of the other harbors up and down the coast, yeah, look into what Avalon does. And I think you'll find that most of those are in the millions of dollars, not just $10,000 or $20,000, as in Newport Harbor. Those are millions of dollars in Avalon Harbor, all right? And they are transferred on a regular basis, but I'll bet you it's just from one person to another person, and there's no brokering going on. If there is, it's an extremely small percentage, and not. It's from private boater to private boater. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Evening. My name's Chuck South. I own the South Mooring Company, and I hold a couple of permits in this town where I keep my floating stock. And there's other construction companies in this harbor that also have floating cranes and barges. And there's no marina that wants to see my crane sitting there, nor my barges. And the city, of course, has no facilities, hardly for loading or unloading well enough where to put them when they're not busy working. And you know, my business would have no value if I couldn't transfer the equipment. And I'm getting old. One of these days, I'm going to let that go. If I can't pick who it goes to, well, then I'm basically out of business. I'd be smarter looking around to move my equipment elsewhere. And actually, I'm needed here. And do you know anyone that owns a mooring in this harbor? And of course they don't. They hold permits, and they're well aware of that. If they have a nice boat out there, and the quality of boats in Newport Beach, by the way, is astoundingly improved since I started doing this 30 years ago. If you have a boat in Newport Beach, there's not much of a choice of where you're going to put it, and it's hard to move them around. If a person cannot pick who they transfer their mooring to, then all of a sudden their boat basically has no value unless they wish to sell it out of the area. Now, that might cause quite a little stir in this harbor with over 1,000 boats out there on those moorings, a system that's been in place for 40 years that works. And by the way, I know lots of people who want moorings and a few who would like to let a few go. And if you call me, I'll tell you what you know. I am no mooring broker. I may charge you by the hour for the time it takes to help you through the paperwork, but that's what I would do. I'm in the mooring business, all things mooring. And there's one other little problem with it. Harbor is growing in the respect that it needs to put more boats in the harbor. Better management of the way vacant moorings is handled generate a tremendous amount of revenue and would put several hundred boats in the harbor at really no additional cost to the city. I think those things need to be looked into, because a waiting list, well, if you have a waiting list and I have 30 calls a week for people that want moorings, I could probably put 5,000 people in 2 years on your waiting list, and then your children will be grown before you can get into boating. I got into this harbor so my children would have a place to boat. They're long grown. I'm on that waiting list, and I've been on it since '72. And it is kind of a spoof and always has been. And I appreciate your indulgence.
Thank you. Okay, seeing nobody else rushing up here, did you start off the discussion?
Yes, but you requested a clarification of a question. I haven't had my chance to speak as a citizen yet. So
All
if
right.
could be afforded that
We'll
that
solicit your
opportunity.
response.
All right. Good evening, Honorable Mayor Webb and council members. My name is John Coro, and as I said before, I reside at 1004 South Bayfront in the city of Newport Beach. I'm speaking to you tonight representing myself on the Harbor Commission and as the Harbor Commission representative to GPAC. I'm also speaking for Harbor Commissioner Tim Collins, who was unable to be here, but who was also the Harbor Commission representative to GPUC. Both of us since the inception of that thing. Both of us have been on the Harbor Commission and have been chairman since its inception. We would like to reaffirm our support for the changes to the harbor and bay element, which are documented in this supplement and on the master chart that have now made their way through the Planning Commission and several iterations, as you've heard this evening, of community input, Harbor Commission, Harbor Resources, and other agency inputs. We believe that we're at a point now where the objectives that you seek, the objectives sought by many of the people representing the mooring permit holders, and I say many, not all, just like we don't always get uniform votes on the Harbor Commission either, would be represented by the direction that's being taken by several things right now. The fact that this has been one of the top 5 items on the Harbor Commission's to-do list and the Harbor Committee's to-do list for almost 8 years now. It has never dropped out of the top 5. It's gone up, actually, in priority. It's never wavered in that respect, and I think we are very interested in the outcome. We're particularly interested in the outcome of the studies that the city will be undertaking, because they can add to the effort that we have had underway with the mooring subcommittee and Harbor Resources. We'd certainly like to see the results of all those efforts come together. We believe that the language that you have in front of you, particularly if you move 2 pages hence to 12.1 and 12.4, address some of the considerations with respect to the monetary aspects and revenue aspects of this that are, I think, of justifiable concern, and in fact were what drove the Harbor Committee and Harbor Commission to put this on their top 5 list, which was that whether it's a transfer, whether it's a sale, whatever it is, there should be a fee in there, and there should be a proportionate sharing of any revenue, any fees with respect to Tidelands revenue generation. That language was revised and tuned by the by the Planning Commission. We support that tuning of that language. We ask your supportive consideration of the entire document here, including the subject under discussion. It is not, as Planning Commissioner Eaton, we are not abrogating, as the Harbor Commission, any of our responsibilities. It is a primary focus on record of that group. And I'm somewhat concerned that there's a belief that we have or are in some way selling the farm. I will say that again. We are not. I think Mr. Kiff can certainly tell you of some discussions that he and I have had that would suggest that we're not directed along those lines. Thank you.
John, if you've been working on it for 8 years, or it's been the top 5 for 8 years, what's taken so long?
What's taken so long? Things like trying to get the harbor dredging permit renewed, things like trying to get LA3 disposal areas so that we'd have a place to drop those dredging things. Other people's timetables have generally, at other levels of agencies, such as Mr. Nichols, Councilman Nichols has suggested, have driven us to have to direct our own concerns as well as Harbor Resources concerns, as well as our own spare time, to trying to get some of the more globally important issues addressed in this harbor. And while it still remains up there and hasn't dropped out, there are other things that pop into and displace some of the other items on that top of the list. And the record is clear. It's written down. You can check every one of our records for 8 years, and you'll see what the issues are that have come into place here. This,
John, you don't have to tell me we have issues here.
As has been suggested,
I understand that there are plenty of issues, and we all have a limited amount of time.
The previous, how can I say this? I'll just say it. For 40 years, this place has been sleeping in the sun for the most part, assuming that things would get done or somebody was doing things in the harbor. When we ended up, as both the Harbor Committee and now the Harbor Commission, we had a collective inheritance of a whole bunch of benign neglect that had collapsed down to a whole series of deadlines, a whole series of competing priorities, and diminishing federal resources and sidestepping of responsibility on things like dredging, and at the same time trying to balance things in the back bay, which are environmentally driven, things in the lower bay, which are environmentally and navigation driven and commerce driven, and so forth. So we are in a situation where we are playing a very intense game of catch-up ball. So the answer to your question is it's still there, but it's a utility outfielder who only gets to bat maybe once every 3 games. So we haven't forgotten him. He's still on the payroll.
Thank you, John.
Okay, thank you.
And we do appreciate all your hard work.
I'd like to bring this back to the council now.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Selledge.
Yeah, I think we should support the Harbor Commission, the Planning Commission's recommendations on this. I think the stricken language is too specific for a general plan. I think it potentially limits our ability in whatever solutions we come up with. I mean, every time we've discussed this, I've asked the question about what other jurisdictions are doing in moorings. We don't have the answer yet. And I just hate to see us restrict ourselves and maybe having to come back and amend the general plan just to come up with a program for these mooring transfers. You know, maybe we come up with a system that doesn't have a waiting list. I mean, I don't know what we're going to come up with. So I mean, to me, with the way they've written it, makes a lot of sense, and I think, it is a general plan, so let's keep it general till we get the information and then actually develop a program.
Mr. Mayor?
Mr. Curry.
Dave, can I ask, if we were to to quote here, regulating transfers by permit holders, might we use additional techniques in addition to a wait list? Might we use, for example, an auction or other techniques to regulate those transfers?
Yes, Councilmember Curry. And I was listening as the folks were testifying, and then Councilmember Selch's point. Maybe the better language, although I would be to say regulate the transfer of moorings to eliminate private properties and allow greater public opportunities for a permit to use a mooring, period.
Well, I sort of like that. I frankly think the words eliminate private profits are editorial and pejorative and frankly a little bit overly Stalinistic for my taste. So I'd like to delete those three words. But I think you're on to something there, Dave, in terms of a policy.
Yeah, I would support that as well.
How does that differ from the policy that's recommended by the Planning Commission and Harbor? In effect, we're essentially saying the same thing. I support the Harbor Commission and Planning Commission myself. Mr. Nichols, what's your thoughts?
I support the commission as well. I think that they actually have done this. We haven't done this. We don't know the slightest thing about it except what we hear, and we can't understand. I would just point out if your name comes up and it's a huge mooring and you have a little boat, do you get the big mooring for your little boat? If it comes up with a little mooring and you have a huge boat, what the hell do you do? Do you have to wait again for another 25 years?
You use a shrinking mechanism instead of a...
I mean, this doesn't make sense. So obviously you got to have a system that works, and generally this is found to work, and it's been ironed out over a long period of time. Don't drop it unless you thought out what you're doing.
Councilmember Daigle, do you have to want to weigh in on this?
I'll go with the staff, Rosansky, Curry approach.
Okay, now we got a three.
I think by the time my comments were fully incorporated, they were more on the line of Mr. Selch, to be frank about it. But I'm giving Dave an opportunity, looked like, to do some wordsmithing there.
Okay, let's go forward with the Harbor Commission, Planning Commission's wording. It appears to be a 4-2 determination. Liveaboard vessels, anybody have any comments on that one?
This is a new location as well as new language. The original language you can see on page 1. It had been HB 4.4.
Okay, I hear nobody complaining about that, so we'll go forward to 7.2, which is having to do with the management of the Upper Bay State Marine Park.
Yes.
Why? The language envelope, is that Planning Commission recommendation?
In both 7.2 and 7.3, it might be easy to take these together.
Okay.
The Planning Commission was responding to comment from a member of the public, and so the Commission added to 7.2 U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, local universities and colleges, and changed 7.3 from assume responsibility from the county for the Upper Newport Bay to consider assuming. And then staff, and you can see the eager person at the podium who did this, was recommending just some clarification and improvement in that language, but along the line of what the Planning Commission recommended.
I had two brief comments, Mr. Mayor, along the lines of Ms. Wood's comments. I wanted to make it clear to the folks reading this and the members of the public a couple of things. One is that the city's orientation about the Newport Bay has changed into more of a, not just, hey, some folks aren't doing it right, maybe we should just step in and fix it and do it differently, but more to be more collaborative and come in and say that we should be a cooperative manager with the two agencies that are there, County of Orange and the California Department of Fish and Game. So I had proposed that language in blue there that I think respects what the Planning Commission said, but also respects this philosophy of the city that we are a collaborator, not somebody coming in to take it over. And that reflects in 7.3 as well. And then finally, I'd note, just for the public, there's been some confusion over this concept of calling the Upper Newport Bay a, quote, state marine park versus an ecological reserve. And this has to do with an action at the state level called the Marine Life Protection Act, where the Marine Life Protection Act directed the state to remove up to 16 different designations for protected areas and consolidate them into 4. And we think the state marine park designation is the most appropriate one through the Marine Life Protection Act. So it's not that the ecological reserve or its nature is changing, it's just that the name and the titles have been changed by the state.
And that doesn't change any of the ecological protections or environmental regulations as relates to this property?
That's correct.
Okay,
does the state have to approve that?
As I understand it, the state would have to actually implement its act, yes, and go ahead and change the names on its own. So this is anticipatory of that.
Okay.
Okay, what's the council's thoughts on this?
I'm okay with it.
Yeah, it makes sense to me.
You okay with the staff's recommendation?
Yes.
You know, it doesn't make sense, though, in that the 5th line down, and volunteer organizations to maximize, improve resources, that I'm assuming you meant either improved or there's an extra word in there.
Just gave mine back to Patty. Can you help me, Sharon, on a clarification there?
It should be to maximize resources rather than to maximize them, or it could be improvement.
It should be to maximize and improve resources management, yeah.
And
Don, just a comment. Mr. Nichols? It seems like we ought to set a priority, and what I would like to see done, and it's only related to this partly, and that is, why don't we get our lower bay so it works, and then go on the upper bay, instead of putting our money and our time in the upper bay, and we don't know whether we're going to get there even, and we'll have used up our resources, and we still have a lower bay that doesn't work. We don't have permits to dredge. We can't get it
That's a little bit off subject here on this one, then.
Well, if we're changing and emphasizing more of the upper bay, that has all kinds of hooks in it that are going to hook us into lots of money.
We have a number of policies that relate to the lower bay, and we also have policies that relate to the upper bay, and I think that we have to balance and cover both of those. We can't regulate one and forget the other, or vice versa. So I think that we have
I
a very
just think
balanced
if we make some kind of a statement that what we want is an operable lower bay, and that's the prime thing, and if the upper bay suffers a little bit because of that, tough. The first priority is the lower bay. It has to work.
We could argue this for probably a long period of time, but I still have to point out that managing the upper bay and managing to collect that silt before it gets to the lower bay does help the lower bay. And it's extremely important that we take care of our resource up there as well as the one down below. You cannot separate them.
There are many ways to collect silt, and in a deep lagoon is one of the poorest.
Dick, that's not the subject right now. Let's continue to go. Is the council's desire to go ahead with the staff's wording on that?
Yes.
Thank you. Item, well, wait a second. We've all of a sudden jumped from 13 to 8 and back again on sea lions?
Because this is the next change from the Planning Commission. Actually, we're going from 7 to 8. This policy had been misplaced by staff initially under Goal 13, and it really belongs under Goal 8 in the harbor element. And then the Planning Commission also wanted to separate it into 2 separate policies because they felt that the feeding of animals that policy should apply not just to sea lions but to birds and things, because we have ordinances that govern that, and then the sea lions territorializing boats and docks would be a separate policy for that impact alone.
Okay. Any comments
Mayor?
on Ms. Lawson?
Just kind of a point of how you might want to process The last one item, you took individual comments on it. You may want to think about or have the council discuss maybe a certain number of policies or within all the policies now within the harbor element, and then allow public comment, or if you want to continue the idea of having public comment on each one of these policies as you consider them. So you may want to think about that, because I think the people in the audience are a little concerned as to when they're going to get a chance to discuss this. So you don't have to allow
I was aware
discussion.
that the mooring
on-
item was a very controversial item. What I
Exactly.
was going to do is try to let them know what we were going to do on the items, and then when we get to the harbor element completed, then I'd ask for comments.
That's what I was going to just say. You may want to announce that so everybody knows. They'll get a chance to talk on whatever ones, other policy issues that they want to at the end of some period of time.
Okay, thank you.
I just have a point of clarification on this, 'cause someone actually approached me in the supermarket the other day and mentioned this. It talks about prohibiting the feeding of animals and depositing food or fish parts in Newport Bay. How does that affect the sea bass pen there, that they feed those fish in there, and they deposit food in there that ultimately falls through the pen into the bottom of the bay?
They have a special permit for that, so they would be conditioned upon
Well,
whatever.
can we add except by special permit or something?
Well, I don't think this policy would prohibit the permit that they have. It would be,
It says prohibit feeding animals and depositing food or fish parts in Newport Bay. Seems pretty clear to me.
it's a general policy of a goal for the council to prohibit that if
Well, then they could, then
I
there's
guess
a
my
claim
point
that
is
they'll, that we should remove the sea bass pen from the harbor and not allow a permit for that.
I think that
I don't think so.
the general policy in the general plan still allows the council to issue permits that are not contrary to the overriding goal that we're trying to achieve here, and the implementing ordinances are always more specific than what you find in the general plan.
I still think it's pretty
Yeah.
unambiguous as to what it says there.
Would you like to propose a change?
A general change might be to adopt regulations that limit.
Or just say limit.
Well, why don't we just say except
Limit.
as permitted by,
Well,
allowed by special permit or something? I don't
You
know.
don't have to do that, because that's the whole idea about the special permit, when you would go through that process, but.
Well, is there somewhere else in here that provides for special permits that I'm just not aware of?
No, there isn't.
No.
But I would think changing the word prohibit to limit
Sure.
would do it.
Wait a minute. Limit, what does that mean? Does that mean I can only throw a small piece in, or does I have to throw in a large piece? It seems like to me that you got to,
Well, I think that's the role of the ordinance, is to provide the specific limitations. What we're saying in the general plan is that the city should devise some limitations, and we don't have to solve it as part of the general plan, just as the general plan doesn't say how many parking spaces we need for various uses.
Well, and actually, this is actually a kind of an after-effect policy of what the council has already done.
all right, do we say accept limit?
Limit works for me.
Okay. 10.3, Harbor Area Management Plan.
This had been a policy as this element went through GPAC and the commissions and the city council initially, and then it somehow was removed from policy and put into the implementation program as the draft document went out. And staff is recommending that it come back as a policy, because we think that the harbor area management plan is so important to the city that it really needs to be at the level of a policy where it gets more notice.
Okay, thank you. Anybody have any comments related to that one?
I'll just make one comment. I've been having a running email exchange with Dave on what is a harbor area management plan, and I saw where he sent me another reply today, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet, so maybe I'll learn what one is. But I think at some point, I know we don't have enough to do, but at some point, need to discuss this a little bit exactly, what it is and what it isn't, and maybe some of the concerns that Councilman Nichols has will be answered in that when we get into defining exactly what it is. But it's something I'm concerned about, that we really understand what we're doing when we do this harbor area management plan.
Councilmember Daigle, did you have something?
I had the same concerns about the HAMP, and I did have the opportunity to sit down with Steve Badum and Chris. I don't remember Chris's last name, so, staff is clearly available, address your concerns too.
Okay, title and revenue, receive a market rate of return as opposed to
Fair.
fair return.
I believe this was the Planning Commission and not the Harbor Commission as well. Just what does fair mean, fair to whom, and market rate is a better understood term. And the same change occurs in 12.3.
Okay. Do we have any comments, complaints, discussion? All right, 12.4.
This is new language that was recommended by the Harbor Commission and the Planning Commission that, as Commissioner Coro, I believe, mentioned earlier, goes hand in hand with the new language regarding the mooring transfers.
Okay, what it states is title and permit transfer fees. Maintain economically suitable transfer fees on all title and permits at a level that does not impede permit transfers but brings a market return to the tidelands. That's for everybody that doesn't necessarily have all our wording here. Any comments one way or the other? Okay. 13.1 is sediment management within the bay. Develop a comprehensive sediment management program that provides for safe navigation and improved water quality.
This was a change recommended by the Harbor Commission, as I recall, to make it a more comprehensive approach than the way the original language had been. And while we are here, I would call to Councilmember Nichols' attention goal HB 13, which is at the top of that page, and it also appears on page 12 of your 11 by 17 sheets with all of its attendant policies. And the goal is deep water channels that are maintained and enhanced to be navigable by boats. And I think this is the section of the element that addresses the council members' concerns about Lower Bay and its function for boating.
I'd like to just say one thing, Sharon, and that is that just having deep water channels in the bay doesn't get us there, because if the other parts of the bay become shallow enough, they're attacked by the eelgrass because they're less than 8 foot deep. The sun gets through, we get the eelgrass, and now we get the problems. And that's essentially what's happening to Balboa Island. So you can't fix the beaches because the eelgrass is encroached so far up that you can't put the tractors on the beach to push it up any further. So, I mean, we're reaching problems because we need to get the whole harbor deep. That's the idea of,
and I think that's
how you get rid of the problem.
Policy 13.3, secure blanket permits or agreements through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the California Coastal Commission to expedite permit processing for residential and commercial dock owners in the bay. And then there are other policies, I believe in the natural resources element that we will also get to this evening, that talk about eelgrass and balancing the various needs.
I think that you're definitely right there in getting this comprehensive policy.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we have now finished our discussion. Is there any, City Attorney?
I'd like to make a comment on one of the proposed policy changes that are in, it's 12.4.
Okay.
The The difference between the 12.1, the tideland revenue, and getting a market rate for revenue for the city's tidelands is a little different than getting a market return for the transfer fees or any kind of permit fees. The city, I think, is going to be limited. I guess I'd make a suggested change for tideland permit fees and take out the word transfer and say something to the effect that the city's policy would be to receive the full cost recovery for permit processing.
Could you read the whole thing?
Is that for a conformity with the state propositions on fees and that kind of thing?
Correct. That we can't exceed the cost of, the full cost recovery for the cost of administering the permit process. It's different than the proprietary capacity that the city has in and getting a full market rate for the other tideland uses that we give people the permits for, but the actual processing of permits and the actual transfer of permits needs to reflect the cost of providing those services.
Okay, thank you.
Is that not what we've been arguing about, though, oppositely, that we think we should get a bigger cut on fee transfer?
Well, that's what I just
And that is
tried to
not, it
clarify.
doesn't cost any more to process a small permit than a big one, and so forth
I think
and
that's
so
what
on.
the attorney has just advised us. Okay, now I'd like to open this up to the public if you have any comments related to any of the harbor resource policies.
Hi, my name is Lori Kieser. I'm a volunteer with the Newport Bay Naturalists and Friends. I came here tonight prepared to talk at length with you about 7.2 and 7.3, but I've reviewed the language that Mr. Kiff proposed, and I support that language, and I would encourage you to do the same, because it encourages a cooperative management rather than an assumption of management of Upper Newport Bay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I believe that...
Can you please state your name again?
Yes, Xavier Victor Peniche Fuentes. I live in Newport Beach. I believe that it should be better. I believe it is better if the city funds, instead of having to get orderly transfer or used or misused, should actually get not used in order to not waste things and do them wrong. One in particular case, the Upper Bay, I believe a lot of kids would love to actually have a little boat and play in the water and get full of mud. And so as the older guys like us would love to actually be able to have a boat and sail. And I don't know if I explained myself well, if I was well understood.
I think that I understand that you'd like to make sure that as many people as possible have use of the bay for boating purposes.
Well, I read this paper, and it seems that the Irvine city has a lot of prospects inside Newport Beach. I think this kind of sounds to me, I do not have any degree whatsoever, that they are buying the city off with complicated plans that none of I talk about the people that live here understand or will actually be able to use on a clear basis. And that's regarding the issue of the money, the funds, the transfers, and the plans. And regarding the issue of the Upper Bay, I used to drive there a lot when I used to live in Irvine. Used to come down here, and there are so many signs that prohibit you from accessing all the Little River and the Upper Bay area. And I seen a lot of kids ditching school and actually going down there and playing, hidden under the bridge. And I just think that's really, really, really bad.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment on the harbor resource element?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Councilperson Jan Vandersloot. I live in Newport Heights. I also have a question about the 13.8 sea lions impact, and I wonder if the prohibition to deposit food or fish parts in Newport Bay would prohibit fishing with live bait or with bait.
it says limit feeding, we changed it from prohibit to limit. And then our ordinance is going to have to further describe the limits that we're imposing.
I'm sure it's not intended to stop fishing, but that you could construe it that way.
Well, only if the bait falls off the hook.
It's always, I never catch a fish anyway, so that's what always happens. I would also ask that you keep the name Ecological Reserve until the State Department of Fish and Game actually changes that name, because calling it a marine park opens up all the possibilities of a park, which means sometimes human activities that are not ecologically sensitive. So I think right now it's the Upper Newport Bay Ecological Reserve. That's what the name is, and you're trying to change it because of what you read into the Marine Life Protection Act. But until the Department of Fish and Game actually changes it, I would suggest you take the name as it is right now.
Thank you.
Monica Twitchell, Mooring K-10. I just wanted to briefly touch upon HB 12.1, tideland revenue. And this is just a small fine point in terms of kind of a reminder of the fact that that particular thing, tidelands users, that, as I understand it, references all of the moorings in the bay as well as private piers, residential docks.
That's correct. Anybody else? Okay, let's move forward to the historical element.
You can see, Mr. Mayor, that the Planning Commission made just a minor change to one policy 2.1, and that was just to qualify that our requirements with regard to paleontological and archaeological resources are only in accordance with CEQA, and that it was not the city's intention to be requiring anything beyond what CEQA requires. The Commission also had some discussion of policy 1.7, which requires that prior to the demolition of a historic structure, the developer offer the structure for relocation by interested parties. When staff explained what that entails, which is essentially just placing an ad in the paper offering the structure, and if someone takes it and has a site to relocate it, fine, but if there aren't any takers within a given period of time, then the demolition and redevelopment of the site can proceed. Then the Commission was comfortable with that, and they had no other comments.
Okay. For your information, I have some small editorial changes that I've worked out with the Heritage Committee of the Centennial Committee as far as the discussion of the history of Newport, and we'll provide those to you. It's just some interpretations of the history as well as adding in a paragraph that relates to the history that is described there today stops pretty much in 1970. And we have another paragraph that we'd like to add in that kind of brings it up to date. And on the chart for historic resources, you have 3 misplaced historical sites. Items 6, 7, and 15 are shown in the wrong locations, and I'll point those out to you too later as so I can go through the wording with the council if they would like to hear it, but
Works for me.
okay. Anybody else on the council have anything to do with the historical element?
No, look forward to more of those centennial moments, though.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to discuss the historical element? And Gay, I apologize for not getting back to you today, but I was... Okay, thank you. All right, we're finished with the historical element, and it's now the recreational element.
The first change recommended by the Planning Commission, and I will confess this one is still a bit mysterious to staff. My notes from the Planning Commission's first review of the recreation element in October were that for the park dedication requirement, our standard in the city for many years has been 5 acres per 1,000 persons. And the note from the Planning Commission discussion was to consider a different standard for higher density residential. I did not have a note for the City Council's discussion on that item, but then we had this new language, except for high-density residential developments in the airport area where the standard shall be 1 acre per 1,000 residents. And neither staff nor the consultants is quite sure where that 1 acre per 1,000 came from. It appears to be in response to the comment from the Planning Commission, but we're not aware that they had a discussion of that specific standard for higher density. So we're still trying to ferret that out among all of our own notes, but wanted to make sure that the council was aware of that.
Could I ask a question, Sharon?
Mr. Nichols?
Doesn't this mean that we have no parkland for hotel use and that kind of thing? So, in other words, if you had a hotel up there, you wouldn't have to donate anything for parkland. Is that right?
That's correct, and that's the way it is today. The requirement applies only to residential development. It has never applied to any kind of commercial or industrial development.
You know, Sharon, I thought when we discussed that the last time, it was that they were supposed to provide the 1 acre per 1,000 ratio with the development and still pay the park in lieu fees on the remaining 4,000. I thought there was some sort of, I don't see that because somebody ends up being in a high-density area that their needs for parkland is going to be any less than anybody else within the community.
Well, I would lean towards agreeing with you. In high density, it might be a little bit less of a demand because you tend to have fewer children, but from my point of view, going from 5 acres per 1,000 to 1 acre per 1,000 is a very big difference, and I'm not comfortable with that recommendation until we at least understand how we got there. I think that what you're referring to, Mr. Mayor, is that in the airport area, a requirement for each one of the residential neighborhoods is a park that would be a minimum of 1 acre in size. And you're correct, that would be part of the 5 acres per 1,000 or however many acres per 1,000 would be required in total.
So this is a Planning Commission recommendation to reduce it, or is it a?
Well, they agreed with this last Thursday evening, but staff and the consultant are not sure where it came from.
I would recommend that we eliminate that. I agree with Don. I don't know why they should pay less there than any other developer in town.
Anybody else would want to weigh in on this?
No, I agree with the mayor. In fact, I think that's what my recollection is we talked about somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 acre per 1,000 in the airport area itself, but they would still pay their fees to provide the community and other park facilities that may or may not be in the airport area itself. So to me, I would say leave it at 5,000. I don't see any reason to take it from that.
Anybody else disagree with that? Okay.
So would you set this then at on the last part of that paragraph at, instead of 1 acre of parkland per 1,000, it would be at 5?
We just remove the blue, so that it ends up being 1 acre per, 5 acres per 1,000.
So we're just going to cross out the blue?
That's right, cross out the blue.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, is there anybody in the audience that wants to speak on this point? Just, I don't want to mess up our process here, but.
Okay, well, we'll do that after we get finished through the rest of the recreation element. And we'll let them weigh in. Okay.
But
so
this is a cross out at this time?
This is a cross out, yes. Okay. 1.1 new residential subdivisions?
Actually, we'll need to eliminate it there as well.
Well, actually, I'm sorry, we didn't structure this very clearly for you. We discovered that policies R 1.1 and 1.2 were repeating one another, and so our proposal that you see at the top of page 5 is to combine them into a new R 1.1. The new language is there, and we'll strike it.
Okay. Thank you. High-density residential developments, this is 1.3.
This change from the Planning Commission was to keep the general plan policy a little bit more general as to when developers would get credit against their 5 acres per thousand for any on-site open space developed with residential projects. You can see that the original language actually had a limit of 30% of the parkland dedication, and the Planning Commission wanted to change that to a for example list.
Sharon, can you remind me where the 30% originally came from?
I think that was the Planning Commission, but I'll check.
And also that and/or language kind of modifies, I mean, basically says that, you know, the and language required public access during, accessible to the public during daylight hours, visible from the public right-of-way, and is sufficient in size to accommodate recreational use by the public. So now it's or language, so it doesn't have to meet all three of those. It can meet only one of those.
Correct, and I thought it should be just or, not and or, but I lost.
Well, by making it and or, it is or, I mean, right?
Right.
But before it was and.
Yes, and that was part of what the Planning Commission thought was too specific for the general plan.
Okay.
So it stays and or stays and.
What's your recommendation, quick?
Or.
Okay, anybody object to or?
That violates the 5 per thousand,
No. The acreage on site of open space developed with residential projects may be credited against the parkland dedication requirements where it is, for example, accessible to the public during daylight hours, visible from public rights-of-way, or is of sufficient size to accommodate recreational use by the public. I think that it really doesn't modify the 1 per 5 acres per 1,000 at all.
So the and would mean that it would be accessible to the public, and or means that it may not be accessible to the public, but it still looks like a park.
Yeah, like the public, they can just put a fence around it so you could see it, but the public can't use it. Under that, that's what I was trying to get with this or language. But when it said and before, the public had a right to use it, had to meet all three of those requirements.
Okay, so are we switching to and now? All right.
I don't know. What is it in our general plan now? How is it?
It isn't.
It isn't. So, is there any kind of credit now in the
No.
general plan? So we're giving a developer something here.
Because this is the first time that we have the requirement for these high-density residential developments to provide on-site recreation space of 44 square feet per dwelling unit. So this is a new set of requirements for a new type of residential development in the airport area.
So, all right, so if they put in, like, let's say 100 units, that's 4,400 square feet of space?
Yes, minimum.
That is a tremendous amount. Wouldn't you want that or because it wouldn't subtract so much from the acreage required, but it would give them, you want to have, if they have a workout room or a pool in their area to be useful only to that group, I think. I mean, you don't want to have rights for the public to be able to come into a high-rise building and use the pool area or.
Well, but 40 on-site recreational amenities is not on-site open space, is it? Is that two different things we're talking about?
Recreational amenity would be a pool, would it not?
Well, but
No,
a
I
workout
think
room is
so.
not open space, and I don't know, maybe a pool is open space, I guess.
It sounds like to me it should be and rather than.
I would think so, too.
Okay, we've switched from or to and. Anybody object? Okay.
And what about that second part there, where they've deleted the 30% of the parkland? I mean, so they're saying that they can provide all their park space, like let's say they're going to have 1,000 residents, and they need to provide 5 acres of parkland. They can provide all of it on-site?
The Planning Commission wanted to have the flexibility, depending on what was proposed, to require less or perhaps more.
Or they could pay a fee, correct? I mean, there may
Well,
simply
the-
not be 5 acres up there.
Well, then it
No,
wouldn't
here we're
apply 'cause
talking
it would
about a
be
credit for what they provide on
on-site,
site.
yeah.
This language has been in the land use element for quite some time. At least my most recent version that went to the city council has it, including the 30%. So we're being consistent by adding it here to the recreation element, although I do have a note from the city council's consideration of the recreation element to consider a credit for on-site recreation space.
Probably the council member with the strongest opinions about this, Councilman Ridgway, he's not here this evening. But I remember many meetings where he did have a view on this issue.
Are you not talking about, Sharon, for example, some of the guard gate communities have recreational facilities within them, and they get credit for that against their park requirement, do they not?
I don't believe they do.
Not
And-
against their public park requirements, no.
And we have not had in the past a requirement for on-site open space and on-site recreational facilities for residential developments. This is a new requirement that is part of our design of a higher density style of residential development for the airport area and for Newport Center.
But
So we're
isn't it-
creating a whole new set of regulations.
I'd just like to hear that again, because that wasn't my understanding. That the communities throughout our area have on-site use areas, and they have on-site facilities. Sometimes it's a pool or so. Now, they were given recreational credit for that, to my knowledge. In other words, they did not have to give as much park area or in lieu fees because they had recreational area.
The planning director has more direct experience with that. I'm going to let her answer.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Our park dedication ordinance doesn't specifically require the city or provide any specific credit for on-site private recreation within residential communities. The city's practice has not to even consider that possibility, but should the parkland not be suggested for dedication, that the full in lieu park fee be paid at minimum as required by the ordinance.
Okay, it appears to me that what we're doing here is if the developer puts together acreage on site which is open to the public, that the public can see from a public right-of-way and the public can use, that it should be credited against its acreage.
That's what this proposal is.
That's what this proposal is.
That's not what our current
Our
requirements.
current plan would require them to have a public park site not necessarily connected with their development.
The current regulations do not require on-site recreational space. This is a new requirement.
For example, Newport Coast then, because they have all their parks within their individual communities, then they have no dedication for public parks. Is that
Okay, but
what
wait a
we're
second.
saying?
Newport Coast, though, does have public dedications. All of those parks the public parks were dedicated to the county. Now, the county did not initially accept that dedication, but they were dedicated to the public, so they aren't private parks.
One
I
thing
think
to
they
note
are.
that is different about Newport Coast and Newport Ridge is that those land use plans were approved by the county where a credit is allowed. And I do believe that in their subdivision map process, which has remained with the county, that those particular communities do receive some credit for their on-site recreational facilities. So they are different from the balance of the city of Newport Beach.
Okay, thank you. We're dwelling on this. Do we accept the and go forward?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. Passive parks, item R 1.9.
The language that are accessible for public use was added by the Planning Commission to ensure that these excess rights-of-way areas would not be planted with native or sensitive plant species so that people would not be able to walk on and enjoy these areas.
What does that mean with the public, with the private improvements that are cascaded down the slope and steps and fountains and other landscaping?
I think it doesn't affect that because that's on their property mostly.
No. That's what we exactly
Oh,
what we're
you
talking
mean
about.
not, you mean on the
There's
flat
almost
levels.
60, there's almost 45 to 50 feet of right-of-way behind the sidewalk before you get to the front property line.
Oh, yes, but all of that is on their front yard, kind of, or
Yeah,
the...
that's right.
Yeah. And gee, Don, we ended up giving that property along Pacific Avenue. Remember, there was a utility easement there, and we gave that property to them. And that was only a year ago. I'm not suggesting that we should be giving it to these people, but I do not believe that they should have people treating it as an open park and having recreational activities in their front lawn. I mean, there's got to be a limit in that regard, too.
Does the council have any comments on this one, Claus? All right, let's move forward. I don't understand the non-city facilities and open space, I and G. What do you mean?
Oh, instead of IE, that is, it should be EG, for example.
Okay. All
One of-
right, support
One of the
facilities.
attorneys on the commission caught that one.
Support facilities, we have a change to vessel launching facilities, including non-motorized sailboats launch facilities in the lower bay.
This was recommended by the Planning Commission in response to a comment from a member of the public.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to make sure that this would be a general goal and not a way to backdoor a decision on Marina Park, which I think we've sort of already visited.
I think it's very general, I understand it. But, okay, does anybody have any other further questions on the recreational element? Okay, I'd like to open the recreational element up to the public comment.
Good evening, Jan Vandersloot, Newport Heights. I guess I didn't quite understand what you were talking about with the limiting native vegetation along the roadways. Is that what you were basically talking about a minute ago? I couldn't find it on the...
No, it's 1.9, and it says, use underutilized city rights-of-way located on Ocean Boulevard and Bayside Drive in Corona Del Mar as passive parks that are accessible for public use.
Right, did you say something there about...
And I
not
indicated
allowing
that there
native
are
vegetation?
some areas on Ocean Boulevard where they have been made into, and encroachment permits issued to where there have been some private encroachments into those areas because of slopes and differences in grade and various different other reasons.
I may have misheard it, but I thought you were saying that you didn't want to have native vegetation there because it might be sensitive vegetation that would be that would not allowed to be walked through or on. And I would, if that were the case, then I would say native vegetation does not prevent people from walking through it.
Okay, this is Ocean Boulevard and Bayside Drive. Is what we were really discussing, I believe. What
I think that was the
what
concern.
policy are you referring to, Dr. Vandersloot?
Well, I really couldn't find it. That's why I have a question.
He's referring to the right policy. Sharon made a comment that the reason for that language was that they wanted to ensure that the park was accessible to people walking through it, and I think Sharon, not the council, made some reference to using or native vegetation preventing people to be able to walk through. Is that accurate?
And that was the Planning Commission's concern and why they wanted to add the phrase that are accessible for public use. They were concerned about landscaping those areas with some kind of materials that were then so sensitive that the public would not have access to the areas anymore.
I think that's a mistaken supposition by the planning commission. If that's what they were thinking, I can't think of anything that would prevent any native landscaping in that situation that would prevent the public from walking through it, and I would hate to see.
How about prickly pear and cholla?
About what?
Prickly pear and cholla.
Well, that by common sense, people might not want to walk on it. They could walk around it, I mean,
that stuff jumps onto you, John. Come on, it just jumps right off the bush.
I know, I've got several things about that.
Okay, well, okay.
The policy language that the commission recommended would not prevent landscaping with natives. I'm just explaining that that was their concern, and they added the language to ensure that these passive parks are accessible for public use.
So in the city's mind, you could still put native vegetation?
As long as the park would still be accessible.
It does. None of the language prevents us from planting anything there. Doesn't say anything about the planting. That was just a comment made by the planning.
We could even plant grass.
Or sedge.
Native grass, thanks.
I'll try not to.
Okay.
Executive Pinche Fuentes. I have two comments.
Okay.
First, I believe this is very serious because I do realize that we are taking decisions to the future on this land and the generations to come. First, I want to say that we have an issue that you guys have to resolve because you have authority, obviously, that is the sensitivity of an animal kingdom versus the actual children, the young generations that actually use those places, that leave those places, that go out when they're finished their homework and play. And I'm talking basically regarding the issue, that's my second issue. When recreation turns private, recreation ends and there's a privilege. And privileged individuals are not public. They're private. That's what I think. I don't know if I was well understood.
I think you were very well understood, actually.
Thank you. Any other public comments on recreational items?
Mr. Mayor, I forgot I had something to add from our, I'm sorry, I didn't realize there was another speaker coming.
all right.
Okay, we'll get back to you.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. I'm Carol McDermott, and I'd like to offer some testimony regarding the policies that you considered in R1.1 and the R1.3 in the high-density residential. A couple of factors I'd like to mention. Back in my old days at the Irvine Company, in dealing both with the county of Orange as well as the city of Irvine, what they found in developing new communities where you really have kind of a clean slate, that when credit is given for private recreational amenities on site, then what happens is you take some of the drain, some of the pressure off of the public facilities. And so to the extent that you can provide a level of credit, then those that are not public, but nonetheless addressing the needs of the residents within, whether it's a higher density development or not, the fact is you're taking some of the strain off of the public facilities. So some credit for private recreational amenities actually has been found in other jurisdictions to work to the benefit of the local agency. With regard to the Newport Coast, the way it worked was the county granted up to, not completely, but up to 50% credit for private recreational amenities within the planned community development. And then the remainder went to develop what was to be a park offered for dedication to the county, but not accepted for that dedication because that would allow the homeowners association to maintain that land until such time as it was annexed by a city and a city had the opportunity to accept the responsibility for taking it over and accepting the offer of dedication or leaving it with the homeowners association, which is, I think, some of the discussion that's been underway between Newport Coast and the city of Newport as to whether they would take over the maintenance of that open space. I think there's an opportunity at the airport to recognize that the demographics of a high-rise development is going to be different than a single-family home or even townhomes, because there will be fewer children, because they're mostly empty nesters and or early what do they call dinks, double income, no kids, living there. And the idea is that there's a balance between those amenities that the developer would develop, maybe even part of a high-rise where the pool can't be seen by the public, but would address some of the recreational needs of those residents. And while the difference between 5 acres per thousand and 1 acre per thousand may not be appropriate, I continue to urge you to consider a difference in the dedication requirements because we have not had any real experience in the high-rise development. And for that reason, I believe that a number of the property owners in the airport area would support my statement of asking for consideration of a slightly different standard. The other thing having to do with your acreage of this on-site open space where you're discussing or and the language which gets a little difficult to follow. As the Planning Commission was looking at that, I think Sharon was right that their objective was to say such as or for example, because you could have a situation depending on the design of the community where a couple of those standards could be met, but perhaps not all of them, and still meet the intent. And so by making it or, it gives the city a little more flexibility in deciding the value of that open space, be it totally accessible or not, but if it's addressing the demographic that's expected to use the facility. So the language was worked very hard at the Planning Commission in an effort to try to get it to express what their intent was. And I think that there continues to be some value in granting a credit for that private open space. And we would continue to advocate your consideration of that. So on that behalf, I would thank you for listening and ask that you might give some additional consideration.
Thank you. Carol, can I just ask a quick question? There seems to be some mystery about the origin of this language from the Planning Commission. Were you there? Can you get some color on their thinking in inserting this language, or did they basically come to the same conclusion that you did in terms of offering these thoughts?
Well, and I didn't testify at the Planning Commission, but they really were searching in their recognition, I think, of the difference between the type of residential that will occur there. I can tell you that the City of Irvine allows 50% credit, up to, again, 50% credit for on-site recreational that is private. And I did not hear where they came up with the 1 acre per thousand, but I do think that they felt strongly that there was a difference and it should be considered. And I don't think they'd be opposed to having a little more research on the part of the staff to come up with a standard that might make more sense. And my colleague here in the business.
Mr. Mayor, Philip Betancourt, 110 Newport Center Drive. I am a Building Industry Association delegate to the General Plan Advisory Committee, and I participated in this particular debate, although I did not vote. I also was not at the Planning Commission deliberation last week, so I couldn't offer any testimony to the genesis of the standard, but I can say, if you'll recall, I have addressed the City Council before on the recreation element of the general plan, recommending that you provide some appropriate credit for non-taxpayer maintained open space and recreation facilities. I think especially in higher density residential projects, it's more likely that those facilities are gated, self-contained enclaves, and they do tend to include more often singles, mingles, move-down empty nesters with a relatively low child yield within the project. We did studies for the Quail Street residences for Brookfield, looking at the Al Gobar analysis done of all of the new homes within the Irvine IBC, about 1,600 family interviews, and we forecast of the 87 homes in that project, there would only be 12 school-age children, so they have a relatively low impact on public facilities, and I do think it's appropriate to provide some appropriate credit for facilities that eases the burden on taxpayers for maintenance and provides self-contained facilities. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment on the recreation element? Okay. Sharon, you started to say something to us on that.
Thank you. We had a general plan public workshop on Saturday, April 1st, and one of the things that we asked attendants to do is fill out some comment cards. Unfortunately, we had very few of those returned, as in 7, but still, out of that, we had 8 comments with regard to Parks and Recreation. I shared those with the Planning Commission, so I think I should share them here. 2 people noted that we need more facilities. 3 people said that we should keep Banning Ranch as open space. 1 person said that we need to identify the funding to acquire Banning Ranch for open space. And we had 2 comments in support of using Marina Park for a park and hand launch facility.
Okay, thank you. There's one other thing that I'd like to comment on, the general discussion of the recreation element on page 8-10 in the table R1 chart. It asterisks the Newport Coast Park area as Newport Coast private park area is 58.1 acres of Newport Coast Parks use and maintenance are subject to the terms of the pre-annexation agreement. Our attorney has given us some indication and interpretations that not all of that 58 acres is necessarily going to end up being private uses. So I think that we need to perhaps consider looking at that as well as the discussion on page 8-16 related to Service Area 12 and the use of those 58 acres because they're in effect saying that 58 acres of park sites are going to remain private, and I think there's some discussion that we haven't made yet, a final determination of whether it's going to be public or private, so I would recommend that our general plan allow for the option for it to be public. Anybody else on the council wish to modify or change any recommendations on the recreation policy based on the testimony heard?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Selich.
Yeah, I'm not in favor of changing any of those policies. I think in reference to Carol's comments, I think comparing us to cities like Irvine or Mission Viejo, those cities started from scratch and they had Quimby ordinances in place from when they started, so they were getting their 5 acres per thousand from the start, where Newport Beach was pretty well developed before the Quimby Act went into effect. So we're always in the position of catching up on our open space ratios. In addition to that, I think that it's been quite a while since we've updated our in lieu fee ordinance. And Sharon, do you know how long it's been since we updated that? I mean, it's been a long time, so we're not collecting fees to what land value is for many, many years. And I also disagree with the concept that people that live in high-density developments need less open space and recreation than people that live in other types of living environments. And I think they're actually finding in many of these high-density areas that they're building today that the recreational demand is as strong in those areas as it is in single-family areas. So I'm happy keeping it the way we have it.
Yeah, I'll agree as well. I think we saw that in testimony earlier today in our study session that there's plenty of demand by adults for, well, in that case it was aquatic facilities, workout rooms, basketball courts, things like that that are underserved in our community. And so although there may only be 12 kids in a development, that doesn't mean that all those adults are not going to want to be on softball teams, adult softball, adult baseball, adult basketball teams, swimming, all those other types of recreational activities, walking their dog in the park. Although they don't have kids, I'm sure a lot of them have pets. So I would support leaving it as is, or as we recommended tonight.
Okay, anybody disagree with that?
No, but I agree with it.
Okay.
And I think we are having experience with the development in the IBC and the City of Irvine standards, and we really have grave concerns about the impacts to our community on the parks and on our roadways. And I agree, earlier today, we heard a lot of public testimony that there's a lot of pressure on our aquatics facilities and the demand in our community. So I would also support these standards that we've worked out.
Thank you. Okay, let's go forward with the arts and cultural element. Does
The only changes in this element that were recommended by the Planning Commission were to add references to literary programs and library facilities. So you see literary added in a number of policies, and a new policy, 2.3, improve and enhance existing library facilities, collections, and computer facilities. And that is another area where we had some comments at the public workshop, a total of 7 in this case. 3 people were happy to see this subject addressed in the general plan. Another 3 people noted need for things like a civic auditorium and cultural arts center, and 1 comment with regard to the need for more monetary support of the arts.
Okay, does anybody have any comments on the cultural element, arts and cultural? Okay, I think we can go forward then to public comments on arts and cultural.
Exterior Victor Peniche Fuentes. I was going to say this at public comment, but I should say now regarding the arts issue. I want to invite you to receive a written plan on the city of Newport Beach. Basically, it's regarding art and issues like graffiti, and it's basically concerning. It's a plan that I will take care of, and it will take care of different kids and.
Go ahead.
Oh, it would take care of like light bulbs and sign up posts and like different walls, different murals, and it will basically make the city of Newport Beach more beautiful artistically, decorate the outdoors of the city.
Okay. I think that's probably above the scope of the general plan. However, if you wanted to work with our Arts Commission on those types of recommendations, you might want to contact them and offer your services.
Can I actually know how to contact them?
If you contact the city manager's office tomorrow, I think
Suzanne? You are the city?
He's a city manager. Okay. Contact his office tomorrow. It's 644-3000 is the phone number.
644-3000?
That's right.
And so it's a yes, correct?
It's what now?
The invitation I gave you to receive a green plan on artistically develop the outdoors of the city.
Okay, what that would be is our Arts Commission is the body of the city that makes recommendations to us on art-related and decorative type items, and so that we would ask them to look at anything that you would propose, and so I'm suggesting that you go to them directly. The next item on the agenda is natural resources element.
Yes, and on this element, there was, in addition to the 11 by 17 sheets, a strikeout and underline of the element, and I think I went a little overboard on giving you the whole element in that fashion, because the only changes were on pages 4, 8, 13, and 14, and they were very minor cleanup changes. Page 25, and I'm not talking about handwritten pages, it's 10-25. The natural resources element in 8.5 by 11 that is attached at the end of your staff report has some minor cleanup changes on pages 4, 8, 13, and 14. And on page 25, policy endpoint 1 should have been shown as new language. The only policy change that staff had recommended in this element was to eliminate policy 3.1, and the Planning Commission agreed with us on that. This was a carryover policy from the existing conservation of natural resources element. It refers to a model to provide information regarding the nature and extent of the water quality problem. It's something that has not been implemented in the more than 20 years that that element has been in place, and we have better methods now to determine the causes of water quality issues, and so we felt that that policy should be eliminated.
Okay. I had made a couple of comments to Mrs. Wood related to the mineral resources description and the oil field descriptions. I think that there needs to be some modifications to that in further describing the difference between the Newport oil field and the West Newport oil field, because it is my understanding that the Newport oil field is that portion of the oil reserves that are offshore, and that the city is the only one that has wells into that area from our 16 wells. And I feel also that there are some modifications and changes that need to be made related to a couple of other items. As we get back to that point, I'll mention those separately. And also on page 10-14, we need to make sure that we get Newport Village, formerly Newport Center Park, changed to Newport Center Park, formerly Newport Village. That's on page 1014 in your planning thing. So I think that you already had picked that up, but
I forgot to write it on my errata sheet, though.
okay. Okay, in discussing the natural resources element, in what the Planning Commission changes have made, does anybody have anything to comment on related to the items shown on page 7? That would be NR 3.1 through 3.22.
Now, are we back to our,
We're back to this sheet.
okay, and are you dealing with NR on page 8, or where are you at exactly?
Right now, we're dealing on page 9,
7, I think.
or 7, I mean.
Okay.
Okay, there, I noticed that I had one more change, and that was NR 3.5, which isn't listed. We should classify our system as a storm drain system and not a storm sewer system.
That's very important.
Yes. Okay, let's go to 3.23. Let's see, that looks like the sea lion impact ties into what was in the harbor policy.
Yes, it's the same language. You may recall that when we talked about not having a separate harbor and bay element to avoid duplication of policies, Harbor Commission did not support that, nor did the Planning Commission or City Council, so the solution was wherever we repeat policies to have a cross-reference to make sure that when we make amendments, we do it in both places. So we would change prohibit to limit.
Where
here.
are you doing? I'm sorry.
Page 8,
Okay, page
3.23.
8. Okay.
Okay, we've jumped to leaf blowers.
And that is
Can
a
I ask a
classification,
question?
clarification, so we aren't talking about hair dryers.
Can I ask a question about the 3.23? Are we, I would like to discourage, well, not discourage, I would like to at least caution people from the public standpoint in dealing with sea lions and so forth on boats. I don't think, we had before kind of said that it's the job of the person who owns the boat to get the thing off, and if he doesn't, he can be fined or something, is what I gathered. And I kind of think maybe we ought to get the public boats out there and shooting them with water or whatever we're doing, rather than have some person who has no facilities attacking these things.
Okay, I think that that's not something that's part of the
It's probably not directly
general
in
plan
here.
yet. We need to review our ordinance on that. Okay. Any comments related to 7.4 or jumping down to, okay, you changed a whole bunch of these, 8.1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And what did you do to replace those?
These policies were added by staff and consultant after the Planning Commission and City Council and GPAC had seen the natural resources element as a result of preliminary findings in the environmental impact report. And we could either have made these mitigation measures or add them as policies to the general plan. And our preference was to put them as policies in the general plan so that everything is incorporated in one document, and 5 years from now, we don't have a staff member that doesn't know to look in the EIR for the mitigation measures. The Planning Commission was concerned with how detailed these were, and it was since the Planning Commission meeting that we thought that they really did have a good point, and we could accomplish the same thing by combining all of them into the new 8.1 that you see at the bottom of page 8, which is more appropriate general plan language. And all of these mitigation measures had to do with managing construction activities to reduce air pollution.
Okay. Thank you.
I believe this approach that's been used here is much better.
Good. Okay, efficient airport operations.
This is the policy that I was stumbling over a minute ago when I was referring you to page 25 in the element. So this shows you the old and the new language.
Okay. Okay, in R11.
The ones under 11 are repeated from the harbor and bay element.
Okay, so
Actually, all of the 11, 16, and 17 series are
Okay, so
repeated
we've already
from harbor and bay.
discussed those, and as
Yes.
long as we make the same changes. Okay. That completes that. Now, my comments related to, on our staff foldouts, on page 41, I had a question about 14.4 and 14.5. Under the wetlands or estuary capacity, it says required that any project that includes diking, filling, or dredging of an estuary must maintain the capacity of the wetland or estuary as required by state and federal law. My concern was, in the definition of capacity, is that capacity the capacity before restoration or after restoration? It would seem like to me that we would want to allow the flexibility to where the restoration would include the wetlands capacity after it's restored, because I'm assuming that would be greater than before restoration. And so maybe you could work on some sort of wording change that might allow for that. And then the next item was new structural design. It says require that all structures permitted to encroach onto open coastal waters, wetlands, and estuaries be sited and designed to be consistent with the natural appearance of the surrounding areas. I think that when you're looking at that, you want to make sure that you're not prohibiting the Newport Pier or docks or other facilities that we are going to allow in there. And so I think you might want them to have some sort of statement like be designed to be in harmony with the surrounding area rather than to have the same natural appearance, because I'm not sure how you have a pier or a dock have natural appearance.
So you would say designed to be in harmony.
Yeah, something to that effect.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
That's standard language for design review.
Okay.
Yes.
I like that.
It's an engineer using a planner word, and I'm embarrassed to do that, but I guess.
I was
Every now
giving
and
you
then
credit, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, it's going to be hard, isn't it? The next one that I had the comments on was on NR 19.1, This has to do with the oil operations, and I believe that under new and existing extraction activities, that we need to make sure that that is reworded somewhat to where it would allow for the city to continue to operate at 16 wells and do what is necessary to keep them going, which means that we would have to allow them to be refitted to increase production, as well as the water injection well that's mentioned there. 19.3, we have, it says new onshore drilling activities, but the recommendation talks about support facilities as opposed to drilling facilities. So I think that we need to clarify that and make sure that it doesn't prohibit, since our city wells all are slant drilled out underneath the ocean, we need to make sure that whatever that policy is, it doesn't prohibit our support facilities from remaining in operation. And
I don't think you're allowing new facilities, right?
no, I'm not suggesting new or additional. I'm suggesting that we be allowed to
continue
to use and refit those facilities that we have, and which may include, in some instances, re-drilling to the extent that you replace the tubing and that type of thing.
Makes sense.
And okay.
Would you consider working on that oil committee a little bit? It's pretty well messed up.
That's, never mind, I will pass on that.
Mr. Mayor.
Anybody else wish to comment on the natural resources, now, on the council?
Mr. Mayor, and this is not one of the policies, but the text of the document, Dr. Vandersloot's communicated with us today on acronym changing, and I just wanted to get a little color and comment on that. I think staff has seen those comments. Not.
I like to...
Was this the name of the marine part?
This change from environmental sensitive areas to environmental study areas, and the use of ESA as an acronym, and flipping that around.
In our former land use plan for the local coastal program, we had mistakenly used the term of environmentally sensitive habitat areas, and that document had been written and approved before that term ESHA had acquired the significance that it does through the Coastal Act, and we had not, in fact, done detailed enough studies to have declared those areas ESHAs. In the recently approved coastal land use plan, we have corrected that, and we have designated areas that have the potential to have that kind of habitat as environmental study areas, and have introduced policies that say before any development occurs, there needs to be further study to identify exactly where and how significant any habitat areas within those study areas may be, so that you can establish buffers, decide how much development to permit or not permit. And that, as you know, has been approved by the City Council as well as the Coastal Commission. So what we are doing in the general plan is following that same convention.
Good. Any comments? All right, I'd like to open the natural resources element up to the public.
Good evening, Jan Vandersloot, Newport Heights. I'm a member of the GPAC committee, but I'm not speaking for the GPAC committee. And I'd like to address that issue of the acronym change from environmentally sensitive area to environmental study area, because that basically is a bureaucratic change. It's not a scientific change. I mean, all the documents of Newport Beach refer to these areas that are environmentally sensitive as environmentally sensitive areas. And this was actually prepared for the city by consultants that was given to the GPAC committee in December 2002. We have thick documents here that talks about all the environmentally sensitive habitat areas in Newport Beach. And again, on July 7, 2003, the GPAC committee discussed the biological resources, and again, there's a consultant report that talks about the environmentally sensitive habitat areas in the city. Someone in the planning department decided not to call these areas environmentally sensitive areas, but to call them environmental study areas, which the common sense of that is that you're downgrading the protections and the significance of Newport Beach's environmentally sensitive areas. And if you want to do that, I suggest that you make sure that the environmental impact report describes the difference between what if you kept all these areas designated as environmentally sensitive areas, and on the other hand, now call them environmentally study areas, where presumably some of those areas, some of the area within the environmentally sensitive area would not be classified as an environmentally sensitive area. And I think that's the whole exercise. The whole exercise is to weaken the significance of the environmentally sensitive area, and I think you're really doing a disservice to the people of Newport Beach and the natural resources of Newport Beach. Again, I would ask that you examine what the environmental impacts are of doing that. And I'd like to say also that the LCP, the Coastal Commission, basically changed the staff's thinking a bit by saying that these environmentally study areas presume there to be environmentally sensitive habitat areas, and the city's going to have to prove that they are not environmentally sensitive areas when they go in and study the areas. But the other aspect of the LCP is that that was exempt from CEQA documentation. So you don't have to do an environmental impact report on the LCP. But you do have to do an environmental impact report on a general plan update. So now is the time for you to look at what this change in acronym will do to the environmentally sensitive areas of Newport Beach, and how much less of a protection that we're going to have if you actually do this. Because when you look at it, I mean, ESA, environmentally sensitive area, that's what everybody thinks ESA means. Somebody cleverly decided that ESA would be a study area and not a sensitive area. And the public is not fooled by that, and I think that you should examine the impacts of doing that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Within the EIR, will that be analyzed, the acronym change?
I don't believe so. What we have analyzed in the EIR is the existing conditions of what kind of biological resources we have, and we had not one but two biological studies performed. And then we will talk about what are the potential impacts to those resources if development pursuant to the proposed general plan takes place. With respect to Dr. Vandersloot, my opinion is that the approach that we're recommending now is a more honest one than we had before, because we do not know how sensitive these areas may be. The quality of the habitat may change over time, the size of the habitat, the sensitivity of it may change over time, and when you really want to have the assessment done and the determination of its sensitivity is before development may occur or at the time when development is being considered.
Okay, thank you. Yes? State your name again, please.
Oh, I have to, right?
Every time.
Yeah, Xavier Victor Peniche Fuentes. And like I said before, it's the sensitivity of the habitat of the animal kingdom versus our habitat that I visualize in this particular issue. The community is polluted. There's so many different cancerous environmental things in the air. The toxicity of the oil, different. I heard it was 6 oil wells in Newport Beach. The oil itself is really toxic. All these different products come from it, and the misuse of it can take all of us down. And I also wanted to say that. I don't know if you have questions.
No, thank you. I don't.
I was going to make 2 statements, but I don't see use for them.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else wish to talk about the natural resource element? Okay. The next element is a safety element. Would the council like to take a 10-minute break since we've been here for about 3.5 hours or 3 hours? Okay, we'll be back, started again at 10 o'clock. Yes, sir. before we get into that, I had one comment on the page 11-4. It talks about storm surges, and I think there's a statement there that I'm not quite sure is justified by the facts, and it has to do with the El Nino Southern Oscillation events impact the area. Storm surges associated with a tropical storm has been reported only once in the history of Newport Beach in 1939. This suggests that the hazard of the cyclone-induced storm surges has a low probability. Nevertheless, this instance caused millions of dollars of damage. I don't believe that's the case. I know that we ended up having to replace 2 piers, but in looking at my history, I don't think that the replacement of those 2 piers cost more than about $100,000, and it may have been less than that.
That's in today's dollars.
I'm sorry, but it's not. I think that's an over. It's something that's.
We could just delete that
Why don't you just delete it?
I'd be happy to.
Sorry about that. Okay, safety element. Sharon.
Okay, the rewording of goal S1, and I think we did a similar thing with goals S2 and S3, was just to be in our standard format where we express the end state. And usually we spell people correctly, but I failed to this time. Policy S1.3, that change from the Planning Commission is just a reordering of the language so that we begin with the verb maintain beach width. And the Planning Commission has never liked policies to start with continue to, so we've corrected more of those.
Okay. And you got a protection of equals again.
Well, it's because I copied and pasted after I did it wrong the first time.
Okay.
Policy, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I lied. We have another element after safety. Policy S8.5, I believe had been in an earlier draft and somehow disappeared. The Airport Working Group wrote to both the Planning Commission and the City Council asking that we have a policy regarding expansion at John Wayne. So this policy has been re-added, and it says oppose facility expansions except those described in the settlement agreement extension. So we are not being inconsistent with anything we've already agreed to.
Sharon, is the safety element the appropriate place for that policy? I mean, I support the policy, but I'm asking, is that the right place for it to go?
We believe it is. We considered putting it in the land use element, but the airport is not within the city limits, and it's not a land use that we control. This is the section of the safety element dealing with aviation hazards, so it seemed to fit well here.
What about the noise element as well?
Well, there is a section in the noise element that has essentially the same thing.
Sorry.
I think what it is as far as the airport is concerned, we can't say enough times in enough different places that we need to oppose the expansion of the airport. Okay, Councilmember Nichols, you had a comment?
Well, just S1.3 on page 10 that talks about tsunami protection by wide beach fronts. Maybe if they're 10 miles wide, but this is crazy. I mean, that ought to be just struck. The first.
I think the wider the beach you have, the less impact you're going to have on the point where it reaches residences. So I think that from that standpoint, at least in my observations, is that if you had, say, dunes that were significantly high, that also would cut down on the energy as it comes ashore. And it depends on the size of the waves, too.
Well, certainly, but I don't think we want to I think we want to maintain our beach width, and I think that's a good But if we're using,
Well, I would be, as far as tsunami run-up is concerned, I'm not as concerned about that as I would be concerned about storm surges and wind-driven waves.
why don't we say that?
I think that's said a
In
little bit
fact,
later.
Mr. Mayor, if I could recommend, there's several, S1, S2, S3. Beach replenishment really applies to all of those. The storm surges, the tsunami rogue waves, and just coastal erosion effects. So you may just want to kind of consolidate those.
Can we leave that up to the staff to,
I would be happy to have fewer policies.
okay. Thank you. All right, are there any other comments on
Mr.
this?
Tesher.
Any other comments on the safety element? Public, general public, anybody want to comment on the safety element? Seeing none, let's go forward to the noise element. Would you like my noise element comments first?
Just one more thing on safety, because I didn't bring this up. The Planning Commission added a new policy, S9.9, regarding effective emergency evacuation programs.
Is that the outing policy?
I'm sorry?
I said, is that the outing policy?
Yes,
Thank you.
but it wasn't even at her suggestion.
Shouldn't that be a little bit more inclusive instead of saying just for the Balboa Peninsula? I think you would want to have West Newport and
Other
areas of risk.
I think that the Balboa Peninsula was called out because of the
Difficulty
street.
in evacuation of the peninsula.
Yeah, that, you're right, that is probably the most critical one.
Sharon, this 3.2 sort of covers that 3.1 very well. I mean, that other stuff on shoreline protection.
Yeah, I think that's what Steve was suggesting on consolidating those policies.
If that, just use that as that whole statement is
Right.
my suggestion. I think it doesn't overdo it to the point where it looks stupid. That's all.
Okay.
And that's important.
The noise element, under the discussion section, on page, this is before we get into the goals, on page 12-24, under chart N3, when did we add in a 40 dBA for nighttime uses? I've only seen the 45 as being the interior mitigation levels in past, and I'm just curious about where the 40 requirement came from.
I believe we were trying to be consistent with the existing code, but I will check.
I guess my concern is that 40 is in a lot of instances below the ambient noise levels.
It is in existing code section 10.26.030, interior noise standards, for residential land uses, from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
Okay.
It's 40.
What was that code section, please?
10.26.030.
10.26.030.
Under, what's the title of that section?
Interior noise standards.
Okay.
I knew there was one like that, and we were exceeding up at the airport area in that triangle of ours by a very significant amount, the nighttime standards. And I mean, they're talking about a 60 dB rating over most of that triangle, which would eliminate any residential. The thought I had, and have been pushing a little bit, is to try and see whether we could get the civilian aircraft, when they take off, and the smaller airplanes using the shorter runway to come down a little further before they made their left turn.
Wait, we're not
You
really
can-
discussing airport noise and patterns here.
I had a question.
Okay, Councilmember Daigle?
Yes, Sharon, we talked earlier today, N2 is a land use noise compatibility matrix that's part of it would be one of the things considered, one of the factors considered in the land use planning process, and so that would be what the surrounding environment would be for residential, whether it's 55 or 60. When you get to table N3, Table N3 talks about how it's more specific in terms of project requirements, and apparently I didn't quite understand what that chart is, and you mentioned about the LEQ, and maybe you could explain for benefit of all of us that these noise levels are measuring like an explosion or something like that. If you can, and maybe there needs to be additional wording to explain what this chart is.
You mean N3?
Yes.
Yeah, we
That's
may
our
need that.
standard- That's our standard chart.
The CNEL is the community noise equivalent level, and that's averaged over a 24-hour period with a weighted average to reflect people's greater sensitivity to noise at night when the ambient level is lower. And so that's what we have in N.2, and that is what we use to establish where various land use types are appropriate. Table N3, as I understand it, and Jesse Barkley from EIP may need to help me with this one, is the LEQ, and that is more for an individual incident of noise. And so this is more guidance on how to design structures for various uses so that they are protected from noise.
This is what you can measure on a noise meter.
Right. I now understand that, but what might be helpful is that language be here, because your expertise may not be here in a year or two when we go to apply and implement this. So
Actually,
I would request.
I think that difference is explained, and had I noticed it sooner, I could have just read it.
Okay.
On page 12-22, the second, the fourth and fifth paragraph from the top. That's easier than counting from the bottom. The one that tells you what the land use compatibility matrix in Table 2 is for, and the next paragraph explains how N3 is used.
Right, and I read that, and I didn't see
Oh,
anything
that's-
about the LEQ.
Okay.
Just
Well, I
it would
guess-
just be more user-friendly.
Okay, now, yeah, that's true. Are we looking at LEQ, or is that table N3 supposed to be CNEL, or is it supposed to be LEQ?
No, N3 is supposed to be LEQ, and
That's
2
single
is
event.
CNEL.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's DBA, that's what you measure on the average of what your reading is.
Right, and that's what it says up at the top.
Right.
But it was, when you read the noise standards in table N3 are intended to be much more specific in terms of so on and so forth, but it talks about CNEL. It should be noted that only the interior noise standard of 45 CNEL for residential uses is required by California. So it looks like to me it's kind of mixing and matching there.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, thank you. We'll straighten that out.
And then I had one other question, or actually I had a couple of other questions on 12-27. It talks about barrier construction funding, and maybe Steve can help out with this. Response went to the East Bluff Homeowners Association, and their issue is they'd like to see an improved sound wall. And it meets the condition where they have rear yards are adjacent to the roadway, and so they're looking down the future, understanding that they could probably be part of a program, to look at a better sound wall. My question is, what potential sources of funds could be used for this? If we were to do a repaving on Jamboree, can we apply roadway funds, or what are eligible funds?
I'd have to probably check on this, but, I guess, you're talking about sound that's generated from transportation uses, so, I would imagine any transportation-related fund, gas tax,
Okay,
and
great.
maybe even Measure M, local turnback, but I'd have to verify that for you.
That'd be helpful, because one of their concerns was that if it's only developer funds, then it might be difficult to find a nexus, and it really is of considerable concern to some of the people that live within that community that, you know, there would be the prospect of getting a sound wall funded if the general plan update goes through.
So is that thought that it would be a new sound wall to replace the existing, because structurally it may not accommodate going up a couple more feet?
I think what we'd do is probably enter into study mode with them in terms of what their concerns were, and then apply the professional engineering in terms of any redesign. They weren't specific as to what they wanted, but they did want to know that there'd be an opportunity to study it and potentially fund it.
You know, it should be noted that in most noise wall mitigation measures that, for roadway purposes at any rate, the mitigation has only really been for the first floor. So that if you have second floor dwellings, it's often almost impossible to get that second floor mitigated. So that we need to be somewhat careful about that, definitions of those. Let's go back. If we're starting to go through the policies, I'd like to start within 1.1, if we could. I have some concerns with that, in that I know that I've discussed the noise documents a little bit, and apparently they're being revised somewhat. But as I read 1.1, it takes these noise contour maps, and it looks like to me that any new development, which would be, I guess, a tear down and rebuild, would look at this map, and if that rebuild of that single-family residential house was inside the 60 CNEL line, each individual property owner would have to do a noise study, as this policy here would be done, to where we're going to have, and I guess the concern that I've always had with using these generalized maps is that they are based on speeds and volumes only, and do not take into consideration the topography, whether or not you're upslope or downslope, whether there's any existing walls there, or whether there's any houses between you and the source. And so that when we just in general say use this map as the requirement for requiring those studies, I think that we're going to cause our residents a significant amount of extra costs for studies that probably don't need to be made. So that I would suggest that in 1.1 be modified, I don't have the wording, unfortunately, in a manner that can take into consideration requiring studies that are only in problem areas, or I know you mentioned the development characteristics, topography, and speeds and everything, but I don't think that your map here reduces the number of individual studies that are going to have to be made.
Well, two things. The mayor has been talking to me about his concerns with the noise contour maps, and as a result of that, we discovered that they were prepared with some errors in the speed limits that were assumed. And we have had calculations done, although the remapping hasn't been completed yet, with the correct speed limits. And also eliminating some of the streets where the average daily traffic volume is just so low, under 5,000 cars per day, that it didn't make sense to include those in the noise maps. So between those two corrections, I think that we would eliminate from the map showing a 60 CNEL contour, which is where this policy applies, many of the single-family residential neighborhoods. And then the suggestion that I would have for policy 1.1 would be to require the study only of projects that require environmental review. So that would eliminate the individual single-family house.
Okay, well, like for instance, in Councilmember Daigle's district, if you show the contour along Jamboree Road, which probably the speed limit and volumes there were correct.
No, actually, that was one of the errors.
Oh, that is? Okay, well, at any rate, if you were to use that as an example, that line goes in a full block from Jamboree Road, and so that I think that if you use your requirement as far as an environmental document, that may solve the problem. But I just don't want everybody within the first block of close to Jamboree Road coming and asking for a noise wall just because this line on the paper is there. Because that's
Right, I share your concern, and I know at our study session, Bob Burnham came to that session. We had a lengthy discussion about the fictional nature of these noise contour lines. And when I see some of the language that's been added in terms of a loop and this sort of thing, I mean, it's as if we already went over that ground in terms of these noise contours. So I'm concerned about the additional language that's since been added.
the concern about the environmental docket language, or?
In terms of the noise contours as it applies up in the airport area.
Oh, okay, but we haven't gotten to that yet.
Okay.
We're going to get to that yet. Mr. Nichols?
Well, I wanted to point out that inconsistency between tables N3 and N2. N3 is measured at your border, and if you're talking multifamily residential, you're talking about an exterior noise level from 7 to 10 at 55 and 10 to 7 at 50, and there's no way in the airport area that that's not exceeded kind of 100% of the time. In the area that I was talking about, the triangle, MacArthur, 73, and campus. Now, my point is that we then talk about here less than 55 in table N2 as being allowable, clearly allowable, we say in zone 1, clearly compatible, and that's not according to our zoning code at all. So I pointed that out at the time, and I'm pointing it out again, that the two are clearly incompatible.
Well, we need to remember that these two tables are using different kinds of measurement. N2 is using the 24-hour average community noise equivalent level, whereas table N3 is using the LEQ.
The LEQ measured in dBA is an instantaneous measurement of sound. And so when the car goes down the street on Pacific Coast Highway, and I'm holding that noise meter at my boundary, that's what I measure in dBA. And so that measurement is what I would get. And if it's over 55, it says that's too high for residential. And I'm not really discounting that and at 50 at night, but I'm saying when you look at the whole airport area in that triangle that you were in those areas, and this CNEL is averaged over a longer time period, it should be lower, not higher than the DBA.
If we look at footnote A on table N3, it indicates that if the ambient noise level exceeds the resulting standard, the ambient shall be the standard. So in the areas you're describing, the ambient would be the standard.
Say that again, word.
It's footnote A.
Okay.
If the ambient noise level exceeds the resulting standard, the ambient shall be the standard.
Okay, let's go forward. So you're recommending on N1.1 that you can handle that particular requirement based on those projects that require an environmental document.
That's my suggestion, yes.
Okay.
And that
Anybody
along with the
object to that?
corrections to the contours.
So you're saying that a CNEL, if that exceeds the DBA, so a point that I would not allow a 50 in an area, and you're saying that I can average 55 and it's okay. That would become the new standard? I mean, that really says that your noise standards are a total farce.
This is what our municipal code says today, and I think what it's trying to recognize is that if you're in a more quiet environment, you will be more disturbed by the short incidence of noise. If you're in an environment that has a higher ambient level, you're less likely to notice the motorcycle that backfires.
But I think it also clearly says that you're not supposed to build residential in an area that has those kinds of background noises.
No, this table is used for assisting with designing projects. It's not the land use compatibility where different land uses may be located.
But your noise standard tables is out of your zoning code, which is, out of your code that's allowable for building. And it also is your nuisance code, and tells you when you have a nuisance that you're supposed to be able to enforce upon.
Okay. I think that as far as the standard graph and chart is concerned, that as long as you're satisfied that LEQ, that's a chart that measures LEQ as opposed to CNEL, then we can move forward. Does anybody else question this chart N3? All right, let's move forward.
Yeah, a public comment.
We're not ready for public comments yet on the noise element until we finish the whole discussion. Okay, we're on policy N 3.1, new development, and that's the one where we are adding the wording in on the JWA loop. Hey, Councilmember Daigle, you had a discussion on that?
We'll have another bite of the apple with this, right? In terms of it will come back again?
Yes, you will.
Okay.
But these were added in response to letters that we received from the Airport Land Use Commission and from John Wayne Airport, and we believe that we need to have this language in the general plan if we are going to be found a conforming agency.
Okay.
Consistent agency.
Sorry.
Right. That's fine. I'd like the opportunity to talk it over with Bob Burnham, and then if there's any proposed changes at a later date, come back with them.
Can I ask what is the appropriate law for findings for an override in 3.2?
It's in the Public Utilities Code, I believe.
Right.
Simply says that we have a hearing and then find
What happens is the Airport Land Use Commission would review your project, and if the Airport Land Use Commission makes a finding that against your project, then the public agency has the right to go back and review the findings that the Airport Land Use Commission made and make their own determination of whether or not they feel that it's appropriate and can pass an override of that. And they then have to notify Airport Land Use Commission of their override. But it's something that the Land Use Commission is really an advisory commission, at least the way I interpret it, and cannot require a city to comply.
So we have the ultimate land use authority?
It's my understanding that that's the case.
But is that not also the case that we assume all liability under that condition?
I would say that the Airport Land Use Commission would not have nearly as much liability if they recommended a denial and we overrode them.
That's what they're saying.
Okay, so we're down to, we cross off airport contours. Why was that?
Because that was where we were essentially saying that we would use the settlement agreement line, and that was not acceptable to the Airport Land Use Commission. So we substituted the reference to the 8-loop.
Okay, which is in 1 and 2.
Yes.
Okay. And then we have...
What was the context in which we got communication from Alan Murphy? Did we show him our general plan, or how was that communication
We
received?
submitted the general plan to the Airport Land Use Commission, as we are required to do. And I don't know if, is this their formal comment, or do they still have more time?
they have more time.
The airport land.
This was just the first comment on this group, so we'll be getting more comments from them related to land use, I'm sure.
Okay, Councilmember Daigle, the Airport Land Use Commission on every agenda has a report on consistent agencies and non-consistent agencies, and Newport Beach is a non-consistent agency. And in their review, each time it's discussed, they talk about what efforts the city or the Airport Land Use Commission have made to make the city consistent. And so that it's just something that's an ongoing, with the city reviewing its general plan, then they have looked at our general plan and made recommendations to us. The Airport Land Use Commission works under Alan Murphy at JWA.
Right. I appreciate that. I know that you serve on that commission. My question is, it does seem to be, though, an iterative process each time we get a couple new things. When or how can we get them to disclose, the totality of what consistency means?
When we give them a full document to review.
They're going to piecemeal it then?
No, well, we have given them the proposed general plan, and I believe they have 90 days before their comments are due to us, and they've had it for about a month.
Don't we become a conforming agency when our land use policies are basically the same within the 65 CNEL as the Airport Land Use Commission?
I think that's the I never have been able to quite understand it myself, and I'm on the commission.
Right. Would it be possible to request in writing from them what it means to be a conforming or agency and consistency?
Yes, I believe that we actually have had that communication, and there are at least individuals on my staff who have a much better understanding of that. Whether it's actually been presented to us in writing, I don't know, but we can check, and if we'd like, we can certainly request that from them. And while there are a number of issues that are involved in the determination for compatibility, the two key ones are recognition of the noise limits for certain kinds of development in proximity to the airport as it relates to the A-Loop 65 CNAL line, and the other big one that pops up are the building height limits.
Okay.
Because it's my understanding an inconsistent agency is supposed to submit all development plans to the Land Use Commission for review, and we haven't been doing that necessarily, just in the airport area.
Well, anything that is required to be reviewed by them, which is not everything, and I believe we require the applicants to actually prepare that submittal.
That's
even
great.
though I believe it's in the name of the city.
Thank you for your efforts to get in writing what it means.
Okay, anything else that we wish to discuss on noise elements? Guys, I've run out of comments. This is terrible. Okay, public comments on the noise element of the general plan.
Secretary Victor Peniche Fuentes here reporting. I want to start off with what distinctive Richard A. Nichols said. There is not such thing as an accurate device that measures the decibels or the dBAs, as in sound, as much as there is not one that measures the real amount of gasoline in the gas stations that goes into your car, as much as there's no a real accurate one that measures how many groceries you wait at the supermarkets, because there is a sticker seal that goes from the state of California in each different measuring devices that is not being taken care of, as in this Orange County. That is just something I know. Regarding the loudness of the motor vehicles, even if it's motorcycle, airplanes, or cars, I believe that you guys should know about the sound pleasures or drag racing. There's big events of drag racing, there's Formula Ones, and these cars are really loud, and these people pay a lot of money to have those cars, and a lot of people gather all together to see them race. It's a big ceremony. I believe so, though, it should be done at daytime. Daytime from 6 to 9 p.m., not at nighttime, not at early hours or late hours, because that disturbs the whole sequence of us being asleep. Also, I would like to recall the fact that ambulances, the fire department ambulances and private also public, also privileged ambulances from all these major different corporations or incorporations, they have these sirens that are actually real loud, and they use them at any discrepancy whatsoever they might have due to the insurance plans. I think that's just, when I grew up, it used to be considered sound pollution in the city. And another thing I have right here. Oh, this is very important regarding the fact that I believe it was distinctive Richard A. Nichols said conforming agencies. I don't think it's conforming. I don't think he meant to say conforming. It's just a pronunciation. I think it's continuing agency, not also consistency agency. Am I correct? Continuing agency? What's the correct word?
In this particular definition, it's consistent or inconsistent agency.
Consistent agency. I believe it is not consistent because you, the mayor, and your House of Representatives, you are not the agency. The city itself is consistent in the territory, in the grounds of America. And I know this from the Constitution. You are not consistent because you will perish. And whatever you do as a House of Mayor today will not stay forever, and you will not be here again. That's what I think it makes this, your agency, not consistent. And
Okay.
that's all I have for asking this fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody have anything else related to the general plan update and elements that we've gone through tonight? Okay. Staff, do you have anything more for us to discuss on the general plan tonight?
Not this evening, but next time you have land use and circulation.
I can't wait. Okay. Let's move ahead to public comments. Public comments are invited on non-agenda items generally considered to be within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers must limit their comments to 3 minutes. Before speaking, please state your name for the record. Is there any public comments?
I'm Nancy Gardner. I'm a member of the Orange Coast River Park Committee. First of all, I want to thank the city for its support of the park. You gave seed money that got us started. You've named a staff liaison, of which we are very appreciative. Recently, the park received a grant from Tom's of Maine to develop a design for several entryways to the park. One in Newport, one in Huntington Beach, one in Costa Mesa. And we have asked the students at Estancia, Newport Harbor High, and one other school, Edison, I think, to design these. And it's a design contest. The winners get $100, and their designs will be then taken to an architect or a designer and created into an actual monument that will be used to mark the beginning of the city. And we're going to be announcing those April 29th at the park, at Fairview Park, 11 to 2. There'll be activities there. We're inviting you all. I'm sure we'll have someone contacting you to ask one of you to give the award to one of the Newport Beach students. I just wanted to say, invite you. If you haven't seen the area of the park, this is a real opportunity. There's also going to be wildflower tours and nature walks. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay, anybody else on public comments? Seeing none. Oh, okay. April 29th, Fairview Park.
Good evening, honorable council members. My name is Skip Jackson, and I own property on Birch Street within the Santa Ana Heights specific plan area. And I'm specifically addressing item number 16, and I wasn't sure if there was going to be public comment on that or not. So
Well, we haven't gotten to item 16 yet, but
I couldn't tell from your
That's a next item, that are two more items.
So you're going to allow public comment on that item? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next item is oral reports from city council members on committee. Oh, wait a second.
Executive Victor Peniche Fuentes, I have one quick question and one quick comment. My question, it's, well, my comment is that I believe the city, every single city should own the media that gets distributed in the city. And well, that's my comment, right? That's just to you guys. And I have a question. I would like to know if anyone here or you, Major, know how to actually how can I actually form my own political party?
I have no clue. And,
honestly?
I can't even give you advice on who you might go to, other than you might go to Orange Coast College to the political science department.
No, I actually have the phone number of the Senate of California, like the House or something. I haven't called, but I just wondered.
Do
Okay,
you have a name for your political party?
No, this is serious. There's actually, we have a place for assembly in Santana.
Okay, well, I would
have 3
suggest
signatures.
I would suggest that somebody in the political science department at Orange Coast College might be able to give you more advice on that.
Thank you. That's a good advice.
Okay, thank you. Oral reports from the City Council and committee activities. The GPUC committee. Mr.
Well, you haven't
Sellers.
had enough of it, so I thought I'd give you a report on this book. No, seriously,
Short report.
there's been no GPUC meetings since the last council meeting.
Okay, the LCP program, we're meeting on an every other week basis and are working on the implementation plan. Newport Advisory Committee, Mr. Curry.
No report on the committee, but I would advise Newport Coast residents that we anticipate staff coming with the bids on the community center at our next council meeting, and also with an agreement on the park dedication at that time as well.
Okay, the Newport Coast, Mr. Nicholas, did you have anything you wanted to say on Newport Coast Advisory? Okay. The Mariners Joint Use Library, this is, we're going to have our grand opening of the library at 11 o'clock on Thursday, April 20th, and we'll be able to cut the ribbon and go into the library for the first time. It will be open to the general public for use on the 21st of April, which is a Friday. Centennial Committee is continuing to meet and produce centennial moments. The Ad hoc Committee for the Marina Park Planning is inactive. And other committee activities that anybody would like to report on?
City Hall Site Committee, we're down to just a couple of sites on that committee, so they continue to fall by the wayside as we have our meetings.
The Facilities Finance Committee also has, is putting together its final recommendations and has pretty much finished looking at the various different financial aspects of funding facilities, as well as the proposed plan for master plan improvements of about $160 million and how it could be funded over the next 10 to 25-year period. And we'll be getting a report back on May 1st to the council. Okay, Planning Commission agenda on item 15.
Mayor, members of the council, Planning Commission's meeting last Thursday was interesting because the commission determined to start some of their meetings at 3 p.m. They did so last Thursday because of the item that has taken up most of your agenda this evening on the, I believe, 7 elements of the general plan update. But the actual action items that were taken, in addition to approving the minutes, was to initiate a code amendment to our height limit chapter in the zoning code to allow a process for an exception to the height of athletic field standards through the review of a use permit. And this will be coming back to the Planning Commission on May 4th, and then subsequent to that to the City Council. Two items were continued without comment. That was a subdivision request at 2961 Cliff Drive, and a request for a minor general plan amendment for property in Cole Center, Newport. The other item acted upon was a use permit request in association with environmental review and other planning applications for the conversion of an existing industrial building on the corner of Dove and Campus, which was formerly the Edlard Industries building, to accommodate a vehicle storage facility and a vehicle repair and new car prep facility that would be used principally by the Land Rover business. One of the things this project will allow for is for the addition of additional brands at the existing sales site for Land Rover on Jamboree Road by removing some of the non-essential retail functions and locating them in an area where they might actually be a bit more appropriate. And that use permit was approved by the Planning Commission. And then the last item, which also was acted upon, doesn't really need a lot of comment because it was their review of the general plan update, and through Sharon's comments throughout the consideration of those elements, you received the action report from the Planning Commission.
And Sharon's given us a lengthy report on that.
Well, I think it was pretty dang complete. It's much more than you would have gotten in this little report.
It
so.
was. We appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any questions of Ms. Temple? Seeing none, let's move forward. Current business. An ordinance of the City of Newport, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Newport Beach adding Chapter 1.35 to the Newport Beach Municipal Code limiting the use of the city's power of eminent domain. Is there a staff report on this?
In this case, if Council Member Curry would like to take over, but this was made, this staff report has been brought to the council at the request of Council Member Curry. We attempted to put together a draft ordinance that would reflect his concerns about the potential abuses of the Kelo case to ensure that that would never occur here in the city. The proposed ordinance would limit the city's ability to use the power of eminent domain when the purpose was for the sole purpose of transferring the property to another person to further private economic development. And I've gone over the different, in my staff report I've provided for the council a little bit of background on the Kelo case, how it works, how the current California's laws works, and also how other cities in the state of California that we're aware of so far have responded to the Kelo case with their own activities.
Good, thank you. Councilman McCurry, is there a comment that you'd like to make at this time?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. As we discussed at our last meeting, the Kelo versus New London decision has opened a public debate on the rights of government to condemn by eminent domain private property and turn that property over to another private party for purposes of development. As noted in the city attorney's report, this practice is limited in California to abuses under the California redevelopment law and is not a practice that the city of Newport Beach is engaged in. However, with the coming takeover of the Santa Ana Heights Redevelopment Agency from the county, it is important that the city establish in law a firm policy in opposition to such takings. Despite the widespread public outcry related to this practice, it continues in California. We're all aware of the efforts of the city of Cypress to condemn the Cottonwood Christian Center for a big box retailer. You may be less familiar with the case of the Grand Havana cigar store in San Diego, which was condemned to make room for a hotel that in fact may not be constructed, or the efforts of a small luggage store near Hollywood and Vine to continue under assault by the city of Los Angeles, or as recently reported in March 20th by the Long Beach Press-Telegram, of efforts by that city to displace the Filipino Baptist Fellowship Church to make way for a housing development. As you know, the County Board of Supervisors unanimously placed a measure on the June ballot prohibiting this practice in county jurisdiction. As noted in the staff report, several cities, including Anaheim, Dana Point, Encinitas, and Chula Vista, are considering or have taken similar actions. We have before us tonight an ordinance that would take effect upon enactment and provide immediate protection for Newport Beach residents. Other cities are considering charter amendments that would prevent future city councils, some less concerned about private property rights, from engaging in this practice. I believe that a charter amendment in the long run is a better solution because it will bind future councils from using eminent domain for purely financial reasons. However, I think it's important that we act tonight to direct that an ordinance be put in place. We have until August to take action on a proposed charter amendment that would be placed on the November ballot. By waiting until close to that date, we'll be better able to evaluate the potential of statewide efforts to curtail this abuse and to craft a measure that is complementary rather than conflicting with state measures. Accordingly, I move that the city attorney be directed to bring back the attached ordinance for it will be first reading the next time. We're not ready for first reading tonight. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Bring back for first reading at our next meeting, and that the city attorney further be instructed to report back to the council in advance of the deadline for placing a charter amendment on the ballot with options for the council's consideration at that time.
Okay, is there any discussion from the city council on this item? Now is your time. Public comments are open.
Good evening again, honorable council members. My name is Skip Jackson, and I own property on Birch Street within the Santa Ana Heights Pacific Plan area. That original plan area had that original plan, I should say, had a provision in it allowing for the taking of private property, handing it over to a redevelopment agency, and then having that redevelopment agency hand over property to another private party. This was limited for a fixed period of time. I believe that period of time was 10 years. When that time came up, the county proposed an extension of the provision. In response to this proposal, a significant number of property owners came forward to object to any extension of the provision, and in fact, the county chose to honor the wishes of the community and let the provision expire. The city's consideration of an ordinance limiting the use of the city's power of eminent domain is consistent with the protections that a real property owner needs in light of the Kelso decision. The transfer of private property to another private property owner is the business of the private parties and not the government. Thank you, Councilman Curry, in advance for your consideration and leadership on this issue and on this very important issue, and I urge you to vote for the ordinance as it's proposed. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else wish to comment on this? Seeing none, is there, council have any discussion on this?
I think this is a good first step, but as pointed out, if it's only an ordinance, it could be overturned by a majority of the council or the opposite way. So the second step that you propose of putting it on as a charter amendment is certainly appropriate. And I would second his motion if that's still open and very much supported.
Okay. What's the pleasure of the council? Okay, actually, this way just considered the proposal and offer staff direction. I think that we agree with Councilmember Curry's direction to the staff, and unless I hear any objections, I don't know that we need to vote. Do we need a vote on this item or not?
It provides direction to staff. I don't think you actually have to vote on that direction, but if you'd like to go ahead and do that since a motion was made, you're free to do that.
Did I hear a second on the motion? All right. Please vote.
Motion carries.
City Clerk.
Motion for reconsideration, a motion to reconsider the vote on any action taken by the City Council at either this meeting or the previous meeting may be made only by one of the council members who voted with the prevailing side.
Any motions? Hearing none. The meeting's adjourned.